All right, hello everybody and welcome to this very special presentation. I actually want to call it a Reverie special presentation where we are going to be talking about One Piece Film Red. Now, many of you guys already know this, but actually last week I was in New York for the premiere of One Piece Film Red. I was joined with a bunch of other awesome One Piece YouTubers who will be in the call with me today, and we wanted to go in depth on this movie because there's a lot of talk regarding Film Red. I think hands down this has got to be one of the most talked about One Piece movies ever made. They are pushing this movie on billboards, on merchandise. If you live in Japan, this movie is absolutely everywhere. And now if you live in America, this movie's everywhere too. I mean, you could see like there was the Times Square takeover for Film Red, all this other stuff. So we figured now would be the perfect opportunity to sit down and talk about it. It's still fresh. We saw the movie on Thursday. And I want to preface this by saying this first and foremost, because I know a lot of people obviously haven't seen the movie yet. I know it's already out in France and in certain parts of Europe, and I think in Australia already, and I'm pretty sure it's out in Japan, obviously. I think it premiered there. So a lot of you can watch this, but some of you won't be able to watch this until after you've seen the movie in North America, and that's totally okay. That's fine. We understand. So what we're going to do on this live stream is we're going to start things off with a spoiler-free discussion, and then about 30 minutes in, we're going to switch to spoiler talk, but there's already so many things to discuss in regards to this movie without actually getting into spoilers that I feel like it's going to be okay. So first 30 minutes, you should be okay. There will be a very obvious spoiler warning that pops up on screen. We'll say, by the way, we're entering the spoiler portion now, like tune out, and also there will be timestamps for this as well. So if you're watching this after the fact and you just want to skip to our spoiler talk, or you just want to skip to, watch the spoiler-free portion and then just watch the rest of the video later, that's totally fine. Timestamps will be there for the VOD. But I know that was a huge concern. A lot of people were saying, are you going to go into spoilers? We are, but not in the first 30 minutes. And again, when we do, we will alert you. We will say it multiple times. We will make it very clear we're entering spoiler talk. And finally, last but not least, I want to give a shout out to my thumbnail artist, James, who did an incredible job on the thumbnail this week. Very last minute, I was like, yo, could you draw Uta with the all access pass in the premiere? He's like, don't worry, Roger, I got you. He did a phenomenal job. That's what you're seeing down in the corner right here. So, with all of that being said, we have a lot of guests today. A lot of people are tuning in. We got, well, actually, you know what? I don't even want to spoil it. I'm going to start the call. Everyone will give their introductions, and we'll get right into it. So here we go. I'm going to start the call. This is so fun. And thank you to all of them for joining me, too. This is really going to be a blast. All right. Start voice call. Here we go. Let's see who's coming in first. Click on voice and video. Headphones. All right. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Let's see, I'm seeing Par Vision, I'm seeing Matt, yo. All right, I'm seeing Hidden Island, I'm seeing that One Piece, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Roger.
Let me open this up full screen so everybody could see you guys as well. Isn't there a way where I could click the thing and then people can see like the group call? Member list? No. Give me a second. Pin messages. I know there's a way to do this without actually showing the chat on screen. Maybe this? Well, we're gonna see.
Oh, you talk about the overlay thing?
Yeah, the overlay thing. Like when you're talking in a call and you see little boxes and it's not just the little symbols. We should have. It doesn't matter. Whatever. It's fine. Just nobody post anything crazy in terms of spoilers in the chat and we should be good. Let me switch this on over. Bada bing. Full screen. And boom, we got the squad. All right, excellent. Here, I can actually do this on the fly too. Check this out. Thank you, by the way, to 29 Kesu for becoming a member. Shout out to you, Nakama. All right, yeah, this'll work for sure. I'll just do this. Boop, 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 boop. Have this as a little bar. And we should be good to go. All right. So who's here right now? Everybody, talk while I'm setting this up.
Yo, this is Larry from that One Piece Talk. Thank you for having me.
Of course, absolutely.
Hello, Roger. This is Hidden from the Hidden Island. Thank you for having me on the show as well. And hello to everyone in the chat.
I like that Hidden introduced himself like we didn't just hang out in New York a couple days ago. That's crazy.
I got to do it for the chat, you know.
Of course, of course. Who? Oh, okay. Zach just joined us as well. Welcome, Zach. Welcome. Oh, his microphone's not working yet.
Who's
Matt's
going next?
Too. Matt, you know what?
Hello, everyone. Okay, hi. I'm Matt Owens, executive producer and showrunner of the One Piece live-action series on Netflix.
Welcome, Matt. Welcome.
Lovely.
Thank y'all.
How am I supposed to go after that?
Yeah, you don't back that up.
Hey guys, it's Parvision. I don't have quite as nice of an intro, but here I am. Hi guys.
We love you all
right.
the same, Parv. Don't worry about it.
What's going on, my broskies? My name is Toadski, #1 Treasure Cruise content creator up in here. What's going on? Thanks for having me, Roger.
Yeah, absolutely. A pleasure. And it was a pleasure working with you as well this whole past week. Me and Toadski, we spent the most time with each other, I think, more than anybody else in this call. Because we were constantly working on Treasure Cruise stuff that you guys are going to see in a couple weeks. But yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm just happy that everybody was able to get together and talk about this. Because obviously I know this is going to be a pretty big discussion. I think there's a lot of stuff to get into when it comes to One Piece Film Red. So first and foremost, and whoever wants to start can start. General impressions of the movie. What did you think about it overall? And what were some of your favorite moments? Spoiler free, of course.
One of the best modern One Piece movies we have had in years.
I can agree with that sentiment. Who's typing, by the way? Hold on, I hear somebody typing in the background.
Oh, that was my bad. Sorry.
All right, no worries, Parv.
It was a lot of fun.
Artur just joined as well. Welcome.
What's up, Artur?
What up?
Artur!
All right.
It's me, Archer, I guess executive producer of the Library of Horror.
Right, there you go.
Yes.
So we're doing general thoughts right now. We're just sort of doing spoiler-free discussion for a little bit before diving into spoilers and really going full force into everything.
The general discussion is that it absolutely blows Stampede out of the water.
I actually agree
we're
with that.
we're starting here already.
That's
We
a
have
hot take. That's a hot take.
I got mixed feelings on the movie, and personally, I liked Stampede more. But we'll get into that. I mean, the reasons kind of dive into spoiler territory, so we'll have to save that for later. But
all I'm gonna say is that there's a reason why I've seen it 8 times. That's all.
I mean, to be fair, you flew across the country, and you literally flew to a different country to come see this
multiple
movie.
times,
So,
right?
Multiple times, yeah.
Yes.
Clearly, he loves the movie.
Oh man.
Honestly, meeting Arturo was one of the best parts about the
It
premiere.
is.
Oh, thanks.
Meeting you
We all got to hang out with the GOAT himself.
Dude, same, seriously. It was so much fun.
It was
I'm
absolutely
so
fun
glad I
too.
continue going.
When we had that little after party afterwards at that little sake bar, and we're sitting out in the patio, we're all hanging out and talking One Piece. It was it was an absolute blast. It's not every day you sort of get to have an IRL reverie.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You mean screaming
Immaculate
vibes?
Right.
Yeah. Matt was really aggressive.
Yes.
But I understood why.
Excuse me. Wait, Larry, I'm the aggressive one, Larry?
I mean, you did call him out, but it was a valid call out. It was fun.
I could have
deserved.
Bro,
Fair,
I could have been
deserved.
down the block and I would have heard Matt scream at me.
I would have ran you down. I would have skywalked and fucking Mouton shotted you in the face, bro.
Okay, to be fair, Matt, the main reason we were all screaming during that little meet and greet was when you revealed that you're actually not a big fan of Hunter x Hunter. That is when everything really popped.
I got the crowd fired up.
We're here to talk about One Piece. Why are you putting me on blast?
Oh no.
I have to
That
do
was
it.
very criminal.
I have to do it. I don't know.
Slander. This is slander.
You got to bank that one for the next reverie.
That's right.
All
Exactly.
I
Put
said
that one in the corner.
is Yu Yu Hakusho was better. That's all I said. Yu Yu
I
Hakusho.
don't know if
agree.
That's what you,
I agree with you. I
think
actually
if
agree with
text
you on that.
Emily right now, I think she will
Yu
disagree
Hakusho
with
was
what you
better.
just said.
Yo, Matt,
It
did you
was
put that
also
on your
late at night.
application?
Oh my God. Put that on your application.
You put that on the
was
application
definitely
when you
not
went to
to
be
be
the One Piece showrunner? You were like, yo, I'm not a fan of Hunter x Hunter. And they were like, oh, bet.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
dude.
exactly. That's how I got
They
the
said,
job.
hey, but
Yes.
you love One Piece, so you know what? You're perfect for this.
Way to bring it back, Roger.
Exactly. Look at that. I'm the segue god. So anyway, anything else you guys want to say in terms of spoiler-free discussion, general thoughts? I think it was interesting. Somebody already said that we feel overall, I think the general consensus among most of us, a couple people had some disagreements, but the general consensus overall does seem to be that Film Red is a stronger film than Stampede was. For the people who don't agree with that, share your opinion as to why right now.
One of my takes is kind of so Hidden Island watched the movie in Japan upon release, and when Japan released the movie, the Uta episodes didn't come out, so episode 1029, 1030, and then they had a special episode. And I watched all of those episodes, and now I finally seen the movie, And I definitely think that those movies should those episodes should preface your film read experience. I definitely think that they boost what the movie's trying to do, and they kind of like build up towards it. And I think that's something that Hidden Island, when he came back and I told him can you watch these episodes so that we could talk about it? He was saying that had he watched those episodes first, it would have made the experience a lot better. So I think like there is some kind of like structural things within the movie. I think some people go towards like the music videos or whatever. There's some like structural stuff that could have been done better in my opinion.
And just to add to that, I don't think when it comes to like movies for anime, a lot of these movies are always going to be non-canon, right? So I feel like when it comes to an anime movie, they should be as self-contained as possible. They shouldn't have supplementary material like 2 filler anime episodes, volume 4 billion. There shouldn't be all this extra stuff on the side that you'd have to like take in order to fully appreciate the movie. That should all be there in the package once we walk into the theater. So for me, when that stuff is left out of film read and, I get to see it after having watched it the first time, I'm like, wow, this stuff should have been in there because I feel like it would have made me care a lot more about what was happening in the movie had they not separated everything. So that's That's a valid point, Hidden, but what I'd say is who's going to see this movie that doesn't know One Piece? So the audience is already going to be consuming supplementary content because they're not going to go and see this film as a first entryway into the series.
I agree with that, but I think one specific thing in particular. Okay, somebody just joined and then completely screwed up the way I have this set up. So wait a minute. Of course it's Randy. What's up, Randy? Welcome. You can stay on video. It's fine. Just let me adjust everything, but you just got to stay on video now. You're forced to be on video the whole rest of the call because I'm switching.
Yes, let's look at that handsome face.
Exactly. Just Randy's face.
You have to show off the figures. He's just flexing on us.
Exactly. Welcome, Randy. Welcome.
How's everybody doing?
Here we go. All right, move this down a little bit. So one thing I was going to hop on just while I'm hold on. Wait. I was hearing myself echoing in the background. There we go.
I think that changed again.
Yeah, one thing I will say, adding to what you were just talking about earlier, is I think when it comes to the supplementary material, the only one thing in the movie that I had a real issue with in terms of the supplementary stuff that wasn't really fully fleshed out in the movie was a moment that is a heavy spoiler talk. So I feel like we can't really go into great detail about that until the spoiler discussion, but I'll say child discovery. Let's leave it at that, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about. That moment in particular, I think we should have seen fleshed out in the film itself. Everything else, I don't know, like the Uta stuff that's in the filler episodes, that's not really a big deal to me. But also, Jay, welcome to the stream, Jay. Welcome. What's
up, Jay?
Oh, sorry, I'm late.
No worries. Don't worry about it.
How you guys doing?
Classic. I talked, for example, with a bunch of other creators already who have seen the movie from other countries and stuff, and it's been interesting because I really loved it, but some others really loved it. I know, for example, Manu really enjoyed it, but then I know someone like Marco or Moncorvo didn't enjoy the movie and actually felt very mixed as well. So I do think that generally the reception has been generally positive, especially with how well the movie has done. But for some people, it just won't click in quite right.
What do you think that is, though, beyond the musical numbers? Because I think that was the big thing that I was hearing people say over and over again is they weren't expecting to be as big of a musical as it is.
Are people just Shanks haters?
The movie is
I don't think there's that many.
Let's be
a fan favorite.
I think most of the criticism will lie in the spoiler section because it's difficult to put the criticism without the spoilers. But I think
I actually expected as many songs as there were because anybody that plays One Piece Bounty Rush, they've been putting all of the songs in the game.
Facts.
And I was just like, God, are there 7 songs? When does it end?
Yeah, the whole album.
The songs are fire though. The songs are great. And honestly, the one battle song we'll get into in the spoiler talk for what it happened. That one battle song is fire.
Oh my god!
I just think.
Chrissy was losing it when that one came on.
But as far as the music goes, it just how loaded it was at one point. I do think like if you're someone that's not super into music, at some point some people are just gonna tune out a little bit. It's like, all right, like another song already, like you know what I'm saying? So it's just up to preference at that point.
I think there were also a bunch of I think there were also a bunch of people that went into the movie expecting it not to be a musical, who didn't know anything about it, more like casual fans, and maybe it rubbed off those the wrong way.
Yeah, and I'll also add to like what Matt Owens was saying about how most of the viewers are going to come in like knowing a lot of the material. But the thing is, like, especially recently with like the Demon Slayer movie, that was like all canon. But then we had the JJK movie where I know like 50 different like Twitch streamers who got into JJK just off of the movie without knowing any about the anime or manga. And I feel like in terms of putting something in the box office, you are going to get a lot of people who come into that movie and just like are expecting to be like, okay, how do I get into this movie? And there's like no part of the movie that kind of like allows for someone who may stumble upon the series through that way, because that is the format of it in the box office. A lot of new people are going to come in and they're going to be shown a format of One Piece that I'm interested to see how that transitions into the future in terms of the musical aspect. But if you came into that and that's your first thing, I don't think there's any part of the series in terms of catching up that like reflects well with this movie, right? Like if you get into like, oh, One Piece is a musical thing, or like there's a lot of fun, and then you watch the series or you read the chapters, you're like, wait, there's nothing here about any of this, you know? So it's a little interesting with how this was a box office movie, and in light of like the JJK trend where they're trying to get more people into the series. I don't know how Film Red did in that aspect, but that's not really the focus of what this movie was for in the first place. But I think
that's an interesting point, though. But from two different places, because one, yes, a movie can incorporate more music. It's a difference of medium. Yeah, if you go and read the One Piece manga, obviously music can't be a big part of it because it's a manga. But I hear you on the difference in expectation.
Yeah, and I think that expectation. As someone who. I was just going to say the expectations also, like, I think that reflected on Wano too. A lot of people had higher expectations with this movie, the way things were marketed and the way things felt. I think that also set a different expectation of what this movie was until closer to it became like more and more apparent that it was going to be a musical focused thing rather than like what we felt as a market where it's like, hey, like Japan was making like chicken nuggets that were red, and it's like you expect like more of a Shanks focus kind of thing.
So that's straw hat bath bombs and stuff. Yeah, I swear I'm not even joking. Like after the stream is over, I have to go run to the mall to get some stuff before I fly out tomorrow night, and I'm stopping by Lush and I'm getting some of the straw hat bath bombs.
Yeah, we'll get to the consumerism problems of this movie in a bit.
Yeah, I can actually.
I know what you're talking about
because I had a lot of firsthand experience with the products and the marketing when I was in Japan. I got to see all of it.
Yeah,
and because it was there in full force this summer, I can say for sure that they were pulling out all the stops for Film Red. And as someone who went into the movie understanding that it was going to be a musical type of movie, when I went in for the first time. I gotta say, like, my gripe doesn't come so much from the amount of music, but the variety of music. And to keep, without going into spoiler stuff, because the soundtrack's out there, we know that the entire soundtrack is Otto's music. It's out there, we know this now. So what I can say is that I do wish they gave some more songs to, like, other characters and stuff, because while it is a manga, right, One Piece does have music as a major theme of the series. There is an emphasis on music, and stuff like Bink Sake is a very important part of the story. So it just kind of surprised me that there wasn't more of that, like from other musically inclined characters, and I feel like there was more.
I think a Brook feature would have been really good. Now that you're bringing that up,
I feel like Soul King should have done a song in this. That's how I feel.
At the very least, like a duet or something. I think that was a big one I was expecting that just didn't end up happening. Yeah, Jay, I saw you were trying to say something earlier. I know you joined a little later. What were you going to say, Jay?
So the music, I wouldn't say bothered me too much, as I did expect that, Uta is a big character in this and she's a singer. I'm expecting, all right, we're going to get a few numbers from her. I thought the voice was incredible. If anything, it was Otto's voice that really stood out for me. when she was singing. I'm like, all right, a few of these could just be anime openings in their own. I was like, all right, I love anime openings, so I'm just like, all right, bet, I'm on board. One of the main issues, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the spoiler section, is was not a fan of Uta herself, and that did a lot of damage for me in terms of how I received the film, because she was a very heavy focus, and there are some things that she did and some decisions that she had that were like, all right, like there was a time when me and Par both looked at each other, and I'm like, all right. That's like that's the line. Like that's the line that was crossed, and I'm like, all right, so that just docked a few points. I'm sure we'll get to that, but I think for the fact that she was such a heavy part of the story, and also someone mentioned Shanks. I called this, but I told us like we're not. I don't know if this is like spoilery, but I don't feel like we got a lot of Shanks from this. To be honest with you.
I don't think that's really that spoilery, because I think that's something that is in a lot of
but it's classic One Piece, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
I mean, it was more than I expected.
I expected him to only show up in a flashback. So to be fair, like at least we got him. But part of me feels a little bit like false advertising, just a little bit in my view. But then again, we can get into that. But
I'm with you on that so much.
I was just like, that is just not. Why was it even called Film Red? That's a question that I really need to ask. Like, because if it should have been Film Red and White, if we're really gonna go by the theme of it. But that's anyone that wants to chime in on that thought. That's kind of my immediate thoughts.
Well, actually, hopping right off of that one, something I want to bring up that ties directly into what Parv was mentioning earlier too is like in terms of expectations for the movie. I think the casual One Piece viewer or somebody who isn't super familiar with it will actually enjoy like the first third of this movie a lot. If they go into this thinking it's like an anime concert, they're probably going to dig it. If they don't really know a lot of stuff about the character, they don't have a lot of expectations about what the characters are going to do. But I think it comes down to like if you are a hardcore One Piece fan and you see a lot of these characters showing up and you're like, oh, it's time for to do something. And that never really happens in the movie. I think that is where some of the hurt ends up coming from. And, again, we'll get into that more during the spoiler part of the discussion with certain big name characters that show up and then certain things happen to them that are questionable. But, I think that the first third and actually the last third of the movie, I really think that the second third is like where some of us were even mentioning like we were kind of dozing off a little bit. But that that final portion of the movie, I think, is incredible as a spectacle. But I think in terms of like story-wise or trying to make it make sense in the One Piece world, if you start diving into it, that's when things kind of fall off a little bit for me. But I think spectacle-wise, absolutely beautiful. And one thing I will also note, this is a One Piece movie that is in IMAX, right? They're releasing it in the IMAX format with that giant screen. I would actually argue, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, I would argue don't see this in IMAX. The IMAX actually detracted from the movie for me because there's so much stuff flashing on screen. The subtitles are small on the very bottom. You're trying to follow what's going along. I think even if you're watching the dub of this movie, I would say don't see it in IMAX, which I know is a wild thing to say. Normally you're seeing movies you're like...
It's not. I felt the exact same way. I'm like, what? Am I the only one struggling to follow everything that's going on in the movie
hold up.
just because of where I was sitting? Yeah, go ahead.
Me, Hayden, and Larry probably speak on this because we were in like row 3. All right, and then when the lyrics were coming up, I was like, I can't read the lyrics. Like, there's 4 lines of subtitles taking up like most of the screen. Like, I want to actually watch the movie. So like, I totally get what you're saying there.
The audio was really good though. Like the bass and everything. That was fantastic. Yeah,
I agree.
That's so
true.
Yeah,
if you could watch it in like Dolby, like because it's a sound focus, I would do that.
Yeah,
that's what you should be looking for.
Sound with the smaller screen, because I think there was a moment about. That's actually a spoiler. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. I love your Marine outfit, by the way. What I will say is I have to avoid using a specific character, but there is a certain fight that happens. And during this fight, characters one after another are doing like tag team attacks with each other, right? During that sequence, things are moving so fast and things are flashing across the screen so much that literally my eyes were tearing up. Not because I was like blown away by what I was seeing on the film, but because my eyeballs literally physically could not handle looking at what was on screen. And I was sitting there with Yannicka, who's one of the, people who works on One Piece Treasure Cruise. Shout out to Yannicka. And she was sitting next to me, and I'm sitting there. Tears are literally coming down my face, and the guy to the other side of me looks over and goes, "Right, isn't this amazing?" I'm like, "Bro, I can't even tell what's going on." These tears
Does he know?
Yeah, no, like the tears aren't from the movie. The tears are from me looking at the screen. I'm just trying to focus. So, yeah, I do think if you wear glasses, it could be an issue.
I mean,
I feel like for that scene it helped out because I was like predicting, because like it had a very patterned like playthrough of what to expect.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, we're gonna see this and this, we're gonna see this and this, and we're gonna see, and then that definitely helped. But I definitely know what you're talking about with like being overwhelmed at certain parts of the animation.
I mean, as someone who has seen the movie on way better screens, I'm incredibly grateful for Crunchell's inviting us, but like generally that theater was awful. We were way too close to the screen, all of us.
I disagree somewhat, though, that the theater's awful, because that theater's
a great theater, actually.
No, the theater, I mean the screen. The screen.
Yeah. It's the format, I think, was wrong for showing it. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah,
on other screens, it looks way, way better, honestly. It's a lot nicer. And I also would personally recommend, if any of you get the opportunity, to watch the movie in 4DX, because that final third act in 4DX is just unbelievable. It's so much fun.
Someone in the chat said, "Bring out the Visine." Yeah, definitely come with your Visine.
Fuck.
Anybody have any other spoiler-free thoughts before we get into? Obviously,
I'll definitely say
what a lot of
this.
people are here for.
I'll say
I
this.
just had the.
Go ahead.
Real quick.
Yeah.
It depends on what type of One Piece fan you are. So a lot of us right here, right now, happen to be hardcore fans. We pay attention to these super, super intricate details, right? And then we have like the other fans that are probably just being introduced to One Piece for the first time ever. Yeah. So you don't really have the aspect that Oda's this huge musical fan and music means so much to him. So the amount of effort that we've heard from the producers saying that he paid very close attention to like them not trying to mess this up in the movie. So granted, it may feel like a music video in the first half. A lot of people that are going to be introduced to this movie are probably seeing One Piece for the first time. So this movie is showing them all the grandiose effects and how great and touching these stories can also be, and also relate to you to some degree. And I think that if you have expectations going into this movie, it will greatly determine how you're going to think this movie is in comparison to the other movies. So for me, being a hardcore fan, I like Z way better than this movie.
Yeah,
but same here.
This movie itself was great in the general aspect of introduction.
Oh, Larry, I didn't know you were a hardcore One Piece fan.
Yeah.
I want to give a huge shout out to Taniguchi-san, Shimizu-san, and Shibata-san for doing the Q&A after the film. It was fantastic.
Dope. Shout out, by the way, to Shimizu-san, too, for having the exact reverse of us sitting in the audience, where he's looking up, talking with all of us, and he's like, "Bro, you have to turn the lights down. I can't see everybody." Everybody was struggling with eye strain during this, whether you were watching the movie or you were doing the talkback. So,
also shout out.
The thing that I could say that's spoiler free, because it's like it's at the beginning of the movie, is this movie just begins, and and that's sometimes that's it can be a thing where, wow, this is awesome, we're getting right into it and everything like that. But I think this movie really would have benefited from like 10 minutes of before just the beginning of the movie, which starts at this concert. And it's like, normally when you're watching the other films, like, we have a scene on the Sunny, like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We needed more setup.
Yes.
Just at the beginning of all of this, we just get thrown into it. Oh, Luffy knows Uta.
Yeah, we'll get to them in spoilers for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But popping off of that, that's what the filler arcs previously did for the movies, where you got introduced to, like, I think Guild to Sorrow had like the Silver Mine arc or something like that, and you got introduced to characters and thematics that were related to the movie prior, and like that's where the Uta episodes help. But I also think that, again, there's like a structural
but the Uta
thing.
Episodes were released after
right
released in Japan.
That's why I was so frustrated. That's why I was so frustrated.
Exactly,
because it's like I didn't get to see that until after. And with the Uta episodes, this is all public, so everyone could have seen the Uta episodes by now. You know, in those episodes, it showed us how Luffy and Uta got to meet each other. So I feel like that is a great thing to just kind of start out the movie with, in my opinion, building off of Randy's points. So
yeah, legitimately,
do you guys think that that's necessary for the movie? Do you feel that the context is it's additional context, which is always nice, but do you feel the context we are given for Uta as a character and her introduction to the story and the introduction to Luffy specifically, is it necessary? Is it good enough in the film?
I don't think it's essential because I enjoy the movie even without having seen those episodes, but I would highly recommend to anyone watching that, like, if you haven't watched the movie yet, before you go to the theater, watch those 2 episodes and it's going to make it even better.
And I was gonna say,
I agree with Arthur.
Yeah, hard agree.
Yeah, as far as Uta goes, like I definitely have my issues with her character and development, but I would actually say her relationship with Luffy is one of the strongest things that is established in the film.
I agree with that.
I really bought.
That I can agree with. I can 100% agree with that.
And I think, like, going off of what Randy was saying too, that I think that 10 minutes before the movie starts, like, that would have been important. I think that there's the 10:29, 10:30, and then they have a special episode that sets up the movie way more than the other 2 episodes. And that's like a setting kind of thing. We understand what the island is, and it prefaces a little bit about what Shanks's relationship to the setting of the movie is, which in the movie they kind of held off for a while, but had you watched that special episode, you would have already known, like, that context of why it's weird that Uta is where she is, and like all of the other stuff. So but we can talk more about the Uta stuff in
spoilers. I think one quick thing I want to say, though, that's not a spoiler related thing at all, is watching this movie, I think I could safely say there are things in this that are, like, essential to know if you're a One Piece fan. Right? Like, I think a big question going into Film Red is, like, is this going to be canon? Right? The way that they were advertising it kind of seemed like it could be more canon than some of the other movies. And then obviously it's been around for a long time, and anyone watching this would know this. This is a mild spoiler for Stampede. Is the end of Stampede, you get the reveal of Laugh Tale, right? That it's not called Raftel, but Laugh Tale. And then we got in the manga, Laugh Tale, that got elaborated on a little bit. There are a couple moments like that that are in this movie that I'm wondering if they are going to be made fully canon in the story. I think parts already are, right? Again, like, if you're a manga reader, you know this. Like, Uta is canon to the story. Uta is a character that exists in the canon story of One Piece. But Uta's actions in this movie, let's just say, I'm trying to be careful. Uta's actions and the situation of this movie, I think, are the non-canon parts of it, right? I think, like, Uta as a character, I could see coming up again later on in the manga. And
similar to Shiki.
Right. Kind of like Shiki. And I also could see the certain thing regarding Shanks that we'll talk about in spoiler things coming up again in the manga as well, regarding, like, where he comes from. But otherwise, beyond that, I do think this is almost like a quote-unquote bad end for some of the characters that we see in this film. That's not
a bad end, like, musical?
Kind of, yeah. Like, the way in which certain things wrap up in this movie, I think this is like a what could have been situation for a character, or multiple characters, honestly, that show up in this film. Whereas, like, when these characters show up in the canon, I think that's when this movie sort of gets disregarded. But those canon bits that are, like, put in the flashbacks about midway through, that's going to be the stuff that's kind of important. Yeah.
But that's an interesting point, though, because if you take Uta as a character, and we're saying that she's canon, which I do agree with.
Yeah.
If you separate her actions in the movie, what's the point of that character in canon?
Right.
Good question. Great question.
So it's hard to separate those two things.
Yeah. I think her past is important in canon,
definitely,
but her presence in the present of the story is more for the movie specifically.
Right. I think we'll
I'll get to that when we get to the spoiler section.
Yeah, I was
going to have an interesting point on that.
Write a little reminder in the Discord. Reminder to bring this exact thing up again. Hold on. Reminder which parts of this are canon to talk about in the spoiler thing. Yeah.
For example, because Mr. Shimizu already kind of explained in an interview that, like, obviously the events of the movie within the timeline aren't canon, but like specific information from it is. And there's already one thing that we saw in the manga that was revealed in the movie, that the movie revealed that now Kobe's called the hero of the Marines, kind of like Garp was, because of his actions at Rocky Port. And then we saw that actually happening during the Amazon Lily chapter. So there's already stuff that's being revealed in the manga from the movie.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe a good part to start then with, maybe spoiler talk. Let's do this. Yeah. So any last minute thing before I throw the massive spoiler warning thing on screen and read a couple of these donations?
Yeah, I personally want to say that I just think that they should have learned their lesson with like the DBZ movies, right? Like you gotta stop labeling things as canon when they're not, because I feel like it does affect the fan base of the people that are gonna go watch the movie. Like, we need to know if this is going to matter or not, especially with all like the promotions that they were doing. And like you said, when JD was like, yo, we should have just called it Film Red and White. Like, we came into this thinking that we were going to get a whole lot of Shanks and a whole lot of canon stuff from Shanks, but it ended up not being that. So when we go and see the movie, our expectations are already dulled, which gives the movie a negative review. And it depends on what type of fan you are. You know what I'm saying? So like, if they did that in a better aspect, I think personally, we would have never questioned Uta at all or her character. We would have just accepted it and just said, you know what, this is just fan service. We're good. But
despite
now it's
marketing, I was always telling people, like, you got to temper your expectations on how much Shanks you're going to get.
Absolutely.
Because there's nothing that is going to get revealed in a movie that is that needs to happen in the manga. Shanks, all of this stuff. I was like, all of this stuff has to happen in the manga first.
Absolutely.
Yes. Definitely.
Look at the logo.
I expected
the D has marks across it. Like,
I was going to say something, but I'll save it.
The thing with Shanks is, and again, this is like, we can't really get into it until we do spoiler talk, but the one thing I will say is that Shanks's actions in the later half of the movie are kind of more than what I expected, if I'm being real. Like, knowing the story, I think we got more from Shanks in the second half than I thought we were going to get in this movie at all. I think the disappointment, for me at least, comes in terms of like the backstory kind of stuff. That's kind of glazed over a little bit. Whereas like the portions towards the ending, I thought were fun, regardless of power scaling, which I'll talk about later.
Oh no!
Oh boy! My time, agenda. Here we go, baby. Give me that agenda. I need it.
Right. So
sweet.
One last thing I want to do before we hop into spoilers, because we've been going for like 30 minutes already, and I know there's like so much we could dive into. This is going to be like an hour and a half long discussion just with the spoiler talk. Real quick, what I want to do, I'm going to shout out one person at a time. Give me your overall number ranking of the movie out of 10. So where would you rank this movie? And then also, where would you put this movie among the top 5 most recent One Piece films? So that's Film Gold, Film Red, Stampede, Strong World, and Z. Where would you put this among those 5? So first person up is going to be Hidden. So Hidden, review score, and where would you put it among the 5 most recent?
I would say out of 10, I have to give it like a light 6 or a strong 5 out of 10 personally. Don't hate me for that, 6. Guys. That's just my honest opinion. And if I had to put it anywhere in the top 5, I would probably put it around the number 4 spot above Strong World. I personally did not like Strong World at all, so that one goes below Red for me. But Z, Stampede, and Gold I have to put above Film Red. I enjoyed all those experiences a lot more when I watched them for the first time. So.
Hidden. That's so disrespectful, bro.
Real quick, hold on. You bring up a good point. This is something that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit too, that we skimmed over, and we could touch on this really briefly, but you just brought this up. The experience of watching the movie. Now, Artur, you were at the French premiere, right? And you were at the Japanese premiere as well, were you not?
No, the Japanese one, no. It was only the French premiere.
It was only the French premiere. You had mentioned when we were all having drinks afterwards that like the atmosphere in France and in Japan was palpable, right? There are people, everyone's screaming and stuff. And I would say like the reaction was much more subdued in North America. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, like in France, there was this big premiere at the Grand Rex, which is like the biggest theater in Europe, and it was 3,000 people in the room. And you know how French people are? They were like losing their minds. Like it was like a football match. And usually I like to watch a movie kind of more silently, just to get more immersed. And like the Falling Times was like that. But at the premiere, having that energy was amazing. And I do agree that it would have been nicer to see a bit more of that from the American premiere. But I wonder if maybe it's just a difference between countries.
And I went to the Australian premiere, and like there was actually like way more hype, even in Australia compared to North America, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and this
I went.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say. So I was at the Japanese premiere. I was there the day of release. So the hype at that time was at its absolute peak for the movie.
Sure.
When I went into the theater, I actually did a documentary on my trip there, and you can see this actually on video on the channel. I had a camera on the movie theater, and there was a sea of people in the theater, and this is during COVID times in Japan. So like everyone is like super picky about social distancing and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and careful. But in this theater, it was packed to the brim. They had to have 3 separate screenings going on at any given time for the movie at the same time to accommodate all those people. But in the theater itself, surprisingly, the response was very, I don't know how to say it, like I guess lukewarm. There wasn't too much of like, the audience wasn't getting rowdy. It was pretty quiet once we walked out of the theater.
Isn't that just the way the Japan people are?
That's the thing. That's the thing. I feel like part of it may not just be it may just be like a cultural thing, depending on where you are. The audience reaction might be different, but we don't know exactly if that totally reflects the general opinion, right? Because a lot of people were quiet in Japan, but I think a lot of them did like the movie. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, then I want to bring it back then. So, Zach, you're up. Number ranking, and where would you put this among the 5 most recent films?
So, number ranking, I would say it's like a rock solid 7 out of 10. And then in terms of comparison to the others, probably 3rd behind Z and Stampede.
Right on. Jay?
Solid 6.5 out of 10. I have not seen Strong World, so I guess I'll give it 4. Until I've seen Strong World. No, I have not seen Strong World.
Really?
Wow.
You haven't seen Strong World?
What?
I have not seen. It's just one of those random things that I just have not done yet. Just like hey, I haven't finished Yu Yu Hakusho either, so I'm not ashamed.
That's future content.
That's okay.
Bro, Jay, come over.
I'm about to say,
come over. Let's watch Strong World and Yu Yu Hakusho, bro. Come over.
As long as you watch Hunter x Hunter, man, I'm not letting you go on that. Just trust me.
I'll do it. We'll trade.
All right, say less. I'm about it, brother.
Parv, you're up.
I think reaction, like once we came out of the movie, one of the main things I said is if you split up the movie into sections, there's a ranking I'd give the first like hour, and there's a ranking I'd give the last like 30 minutes or 40 minutes. And it averaged out to my reaction, which was like a 6.5 out of 10. I think me and Jay kind of agreed on that. Now, where I'd rank it above the movies, I think that's like, because I did a movie review for Strong World where I was basically saying that Strong World was like blueprints for what Oda had in plan for the time skip, and it was like 1-to-1, even with the way Kaido was taken down. That was in Strong World the exact same way, with the clouds, the lightning strike. It's pretty much the same thing. And what I was telling my viewers is that like this movie might be subtly doing the same thing, where we won't recognize how it relates to what's coming ahead. And if I take that in consideration, I think that this is definitely like a top 3. I think I liked Z, and then Stampede was more like a mash, like everyone was just kind of fighting, and it's that kind of genre of a movie.
Sure.
Whereas this one had more of like the plot relevance that I would put, that a lot of people think Strong World isn't that great for, but I liked Strong World. So I was like Z, and then like Strong World in red, and then Gold and Stampede. But I like all of them, so it like take that with a grain of salt. But for me, 6.5 I think is solid overall for what this movie was expected to do in the first place.
Right on. Randy?
So I think I'm probably at like I'm right with Par on it, that I think the movie itself feels like it's a 6.5, but I think that the experience of being there with everybody and everything like kicks it up a notch to where I could go 7, maybe even 7.5. But And it's funny too, because I think was it Horror or Hidden that came up to me right afterwards and was just like, "All right, what are you doing?" And then I immediately said, "Well, the first half, is like, the first act I would probably give like a 3, and then but the last of it, it all sort of evens out because the end, pretty great, as far as like just hype, but overall, plot was a little thin, so just that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah. Probably in the 7 area. And then in terms of like movies, I feel like a parrot here, but I mean Z just is my favorite film also. Yes. And but I think the best thing to come out of all of these movies is Chapter 0.
Yes.
Maybe not necessarily like even like Strong World in itself, but I do like how Strong World, unlike most of the other films, like actually you could like put it in after Thriller Bark and say, and tell someone, oh, you can watch this movie and then go to the archipelago. So that's one thing that I like about that film. So, I mean, maybe I'd put that in 2 or 3. Film Red is probably like around like maybe 4 or 5 out of these movies.
Right on. That One Piece talk. Let's go.
Listen, man, I ain't even going cap. We know that it's about 6.9 out of 10 easy. I want to say 7, but I can't give it that 7. Now, for movies, in terms of ranking, you got to go with Z, bro. He had the singing, he had the swag, he was the trainer of the admirals. Like, everything that we saw in that movie, you just wanted it to be true. And I think that that's the feeling that we wanted to see with Film Red. Everything we wanted to see, we wanted it to be true, but it wasn't, right? So I would say Z. Then I would have to go probably with Strong World because we had Shiki. Like, we just found out he was in the Rocks Pirates. You know what I'm saying? Like, then he was like dancing and he had the choreograph with the swords, his legs. Like, bro, off the chain.
Bro, that portion of the movie I hate. I just have to interrupt you, man. Like that.
Really?
The dance sequence in Strong World that repeats twice. Bro. That has the gorilla guy and the Caesar clown light dancing with him. Bro, that entire
part shoes.
Stop. And then Nami's looking at them like,
and that's actually Caesar's voice too, playing that.
It was set up for Queen. Shiki had to walk so Queen could run. Everyone loves Queen.
Listen, bro. All I'm saying is Shiki was that guy, man. There was so much lore around Shiki. That's the thing too. Like Shiki broke out of Impel Down. He was the first dude. He fought Sengoku and Garp in Chapter 0. Like, there was so much to be had with Shiki. And I wanted him to be so much more like fluffed up than we previously known. So I would say Z, Strong World, and then I would probably say Stampede just because of fan service. Sure. And we saw Bullet and how great Bullet was and his connection to Roger. And then he like soloed the Supernova easy.
Oh my God.
Yo, bro, it was insane. And then I would have to throw it between, I would say Gold is probably a little bit better than Red because Gold had, Tesoro, his backstory went so hard. I feel like his backstory made the movie, like if there was more backstory.
Which was a little longer.
Bro, it would have been phenomenal.
A little longer.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. All. But I think that
Tesoro
Gold
is
Red,
my favorite villain out of the movies.
Yeah, like Red and Gold.
Yeah.
Really? What?
I like his vibe.
Yeah, I
like his vibe.
I'd agree with that.
And sauce.
Randy, I could see you pulling off a Tesoro cosplay, honestly. He has the swag.
Let's see it.
I feel it. I actually feel it.
I vibe.
You like him more than
Z is amazing.
You like him more than Z?
Z is the best. Let me get this right. Z is the best villain to come out of all of the movies. Tesoro is my favorite. Design wise,
right? Yeah, exactly.
He just likes his
That's how I feel about Bullet. I like Bullet's design. I think he's a really cool character. Just the movie didn't like pull it off.
Yo, his name is the Demon Air, bro. The dude goes hard.
This when we were at the Treasure Cruise booth, I was like, the reason I like Bullet is because of the unit in Treasure Cruise.
Right.
That's literally the only reason.
The movie did not do Bullet any favors.
Treasure Cruise.
Bullet is just Unga Bunga, man.
Yeah.
The movie did not do him any favors.
All right.
Bullet came out. Treasure Cruise was overpowered. I loved it.
This because I know there's a lot of people that want to do spoiler talk, and we're almost at an hour now. So Artur,
Bullet has a similar backstory to Kaido. I'm just saying.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Matt. That's a whole different discussion to be had. But all right, Artur, let's hear number score and ranking among the most recent 5.
I already made a review for this for my website, so I did actually give it a score, and I give it a 9, which is very biased, admittedly, but I really, really love this movie, and I feel more than anything for me, my favorite movie has always been Strong World, because it's the one that Oda was most involved with. It's the only one he properly directly wrote, and it just has like a nostalgia appeal and like such a classic One Piece vibe to it that I absolutely love. But the thing about film Red is that I feel like it's the One Piece movie that has made me the most emotionally invested. And I'm kind of curious if anyone else here also felt the same, because I know that Manu told me he did too. But I actually ended up crying watching the movie. Every time that I watch it, just gets me really emotional. And it's a personal thing. But I know, for example, that Manu also told me he cried. And a few people who saw the movie also told me they cried watching it. And I kind of wonder if people felt that emotional. But I think it all depends on how well Oda manages to sell the character to Uta, to you personally as a person, as a viewer, whereas some other people might have felt like, oh yeah, that's a shame, but I don't feel that emotional connection, you know?
Like I said, I had tears flowing, but they weren't from the movie. It was from seeing it on the big screen.
Goddamn IMAX.
Right. No, I do think that's an interesting point you bring up, though, because obviously I think you're the highest score among all of us, putting it at a 9. Yeah. So I am curious, like, what aspects, if you could jump into it a little bit, spoiler free, of Uta was what like really resonated with you?
I just generally really like the character. Like, something that I love about Uta is that, without going into spoilers, a lot of her motivations and a lot of the way her character developed is the way that her interaction with her public has affected her. And as a YouTuber, as a content creator, I really like a lot of that. There's a scene in the movie, again, without spoilers, where, for example, Uta's like, why are you getting mad at me? I'm just doing what my audience wanted, right? But it's like, I feel like it reflects a lot of those things. And seeing, you know, all of Uta's story with her problems with her family and her father, and then kind of seeing how she struggled with both an audience and being able to do those things, and kind of how all that ties back to Luffy. And despite the fact that Uta is by all means a retcon character, because obviously Oda never came up with her at the origin of the story, she just ties with childhood Luffy in such a neat way that it just kind of works. I don't know how. This movie feels very non-canon in some aspects, yet Oda manages to make it feel very canon in some others. And I really, really love that.
Right on. Matt, number score, and where would you place this among the most recent 5?
So I'm a little closer to Artur's side of things than the rest of the gang. I would give this an 8. I would give Film Red an 8. And I would say my ranking, don't at me. Number 5 is Z. Number 4 is Gold. Number 4. Let me finish.
Hold on.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Larry, hold on. Can I mute Larry?
I got you, bro. Larry, I got you. Here you go.
Number 5 is Z. Number 4 is Gold. Number 3 is Stampede. Number 3 is Red. Number 2 is Strong World, and 1 is Stampede.
Okay.
Wow. Respect the Stampede choice.
Wow.
I respect the Stampede.
Wow. All right.
Stampede was one. Look, Stampede was made as it's an anniversary movie. It's a hype movie, and it delivers on that.
Yes. Except
it's not
for
a perfect film. It isn't a perfect like. Once Bullet uses his powers and we just have a giant monster on the loose, it's like, what's happening? But then you still get that shot of the final characters who are going to take him down. Some of the fan favorites, some of the most important characters in the entire series. Like, that's what we're there for in that movie, and it delivered.
I agree 100%.
You know why that movie didn't deliver? Because Smoker was in it.
Bro, what?
Bro, I will not stand for. I will not stand for.
As a notorious smoker slander, I feel it was unnecessary, but I'm not gonna say no. I'm not gonna say no.
The bad thing about Stampede,
if that's how you feel with where the manga's going right now, you might be very disappointed in the upcoming story arc. Let me just tell you, man. I'm up next in Discord order. I think this is a really solid 7.5. I think it's a 7.5. I think easily my third favorite of the most recent films. I think number 1 for me is Z, far and away, no question. Number 2 for me is actually Film Gold, for a very similar reason as to why Film Red is 3 for me. And that is because I think Film Gold has a really good, solid, memorable supporting cast. They don't, like, you remember Baccarat, you remember Dice and his weird, like, getting punched
Karina,
like, hurt me more. You remember Karina,
yes.
exactly. You remember like the little spy Tontada dude that's like slinking around in the background like a secret agent. And Tesoro's great. I feel like the supporting cast of Gold is really, really excellent. But my concern, looking at Gold versus like Z, is I think the story overall doesn't hit as strong for me. And that's kind of where I am with Film Red as well, as I feel like the supporting cast, like Uta, Gordon, really solid characters. You understand them by the ending of it, even if you disagree with their motivations. But I do feel like I could at least relate to them and like wanted to see more from them on the screen. Whereas I can't really say that for Stampede and Strong World beyond Shiki. I think Shiki's obviously a really fun villain, but like looking at the other characters in Strong World, they didn't connect with me as much. And again, same goes for Stampede. I think Bullet is cool looking, but like the other characters that they threw in there, like if you guys remember in Stampede, they had the girl from Tokyo Tower, right? Like the little announcer girl. Yeah. They're like, we'll make her as part of the story. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then she like kind of really doesn't do anything the whole movie. No. And there's a lot of things like that in Stampede that I didn't really love. But overall, I think it's like a solid 7.5 out of 10. I really did enjoy myself. And I actually think the reason why it's probably a little higher than a lot of the other people who are in here, who I think we were all kind of like around that 7 range. The reason why I bump it a little higher is I actually really love the first third of this movie. I really, really enjoy it, which I know is something most people disagree with. I love musicals. Anybody who watches my YouTube channel knows I love musicals. And the first third of this movie is straight up a musical. There is not a lot of dialogue. It is just Uta singing one song after another with like these little vignettes in between where she's either talking to the Straw Hats or talking to the audience. That portion I loved. It's when we got into the second third of the movie, which again we'll discuss in spoilers, that is where I started to have an issue with things. And then of course that finale musical number at the ending I thought was great. So yeah, solid 7.5 out of 10 for me, and is the third favorite among the 5 most recent. Toadski! Actually, Toadski, I'm saving you for last because Chrissy hopped in. And Chrissy, you were there at the movie as well. I want to hear your thoughts very briefly. Let us know, what would be your number ranking? Where would you put this among the top 5? And what were your favorite moments, spoiler free?
Okay, so hi everyone. I would rank this a 7.5 as well. I thought a lot about it. Originally it was a 7, but I bumped it back up to 7.5. And the way that I would rank it in terms of the other movies is I wrote down a list. Stampede number 1.
Yes.
Another Stampede number 1. Interesting. Okay.
Yes. Well, the reason being is Stampede was the first One Piece film that I saw in theaters. So I have a little bit of, I think, bias. And also what I loved about Stampede was you got to see all the characters you know and love. And any One Piece movie that does that, any arc that does that, I'm like in. I mean, I got to see Boa again. So anytime I get to see Boa, I get really excited. Film Z has to be number 2. And funny enough, funny story, the stream with Randy for the chapter, I actually misremembered Film Z, a scene from it as canon. So in my opinion, if I'm misremembering something like, it's a Kuzan scene in Film Z. If I'm misremembering something as canon, like that means that film was pretty good. I have to say.
I was like, you're talking about the bath scene, right?
Yeah.
So I had a very similar situation the other day on my chapter reaction because they mentioned the character with the burn scar, right? And I thought the exact same thing that you did. I was like, I'm pretty sure everybody knows that Kuzan has like the giant scar from the fight with Punk Hazard because they saw him. And then I realized, oh no, that's part of that movie. Yeah, so I'm actually right there with you. Yeah.
I thought totally like a canon scene. And then Randy was like, no, Chrissy, that was from the movie. I was like, oh my gosh. Number 3 for me would be Film Gold. And that is purely because of everyone's fits and sauce.
There you go. Fair enough. Yes. Fair enough.
If you know, you know. If you know, you know.
You know. Fits and sauce. I would put Red as number 4. and Strong World number 5. So those are my top 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good choice. Totski, last but not least, let's hear from you. Overall thoughts, number score, where would you place it among the most recent 5?
I'm a huge simp for really good music, and Ado is a fantastic singer, and that was probably one of the big driving forces as to why I rank it an 8 out of 10, because the OST and the music, just everything combined in terms of the audio was fantastic in the film, and that's what would get me to rewatch it, because it's essentially like watching an Uta concert. It's just amazing. So that particular reason is why I'd give it such a high score. Obviously, the middle section of the film isn't great, and then towards the end of the film where you have the final act, similar to Arto, I actually did have a bit of an emotional connection with that, not only because of just like the characters and the relationships, but the music also in those scenes as well is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So very, very awesome film, and I loved it a lot. So I'd give it an 8 out of 10. And overall, where I'd rank it, I think I'd put Z as number 1 for me. Red would be my second favorite.
Wow. Okay.
And then I'd have Stampede as number 3. And then Gold and Strong World. But like I when I say like those ones are lower than Red, it doesn't mean that it's like, like a 0 out of 10.
No,
like all of the films are great, realistically.
Yes.
Just you got to rank them in some fashion.
Yeah, compared to each other, I feel absolutely.
Exactly.
Like, whenever I say Strong World's my least favorite, people are always like, "How did you hate Strong World?" I'm like, I didn't hate Strong World. It just had more weak sections to me personally.
Right, and everyone's different, and that's what makes the community so great. It was all varying opinions. It's great.
Exactly. One thing I will say then, based on hearing from everybody, it does kind of seem like the overall average is like 7. Is where we are right now, because there were like I think lowest was Hidden Island, right? I think you said 5.
Yeah, Strong 5, Light 6,
and then Light 6, and then the highest was Artur with 9. So I feel like you look at that, combine them here, everybody who's sort of kind of in the middle. I think it's like a solid 7 overall. So if you are at all debating seeing this movie as a One Piece fan, I still think like you should absolutely still go see it, regardless of like the issues we have with it, because you might end up loving the movie. There might be things in it that you're like, wow, this really resonated with me. It's so good. You might be somebody who loves the musical sections like I did, or you might be somebody who really connects with the ending portion of the movie, like the big fight sequence at the ending. So who knows? Go check it out for yourself. When is it officially in theaters in North America?
November
4th.
November 4th. We should know after going to the Times Square thing, seeing it in
exactly. It was blasted everywhere.
Everywhere.
So I missed that, by the way. So upset.
It was
so
awesome.
I'm sad about that. It looks so cool.
Oh yeah, and another reason why this movie is great is it has Shanks in it.
There you go.
I guess.
There you go.
Sprinkles.
Yes.
Shanks is the goat.
If I speak.
So real quick.
Yeah, he was there too. I remember now.
Before we hop into spoiler talk, I really quickly want to give a shout out. We've actually had a lot of donations on the stream so far, so let me kind of breeze through these. First, we got one from Wheezy Bird, who said, just so you guys know, there's canon info in the Japanese booklet that Japanese viewers got for watching the movie that Ortura and Sandman translated. So if you have not already seen that, go check that out for yourself. Is there anything worth noting? I guess that kind of goes into spoiler territory a little bit in terms of like canon stuff. So remind me to ask you to bring that up again, like things that are in that. Just don't let me forget. Austin Smith donated and said, does the movie have any spoilers for the series besides Uta's backstory, like Marineford spoilers? So you're talking like spoilers of things that happened prior to the time skip. Yeah, I guess there are probably
or people
a few.
who are not caught up, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I've had people ask me that as well. It's like, are there spoilers if you're not caught up? There are a few if you're not caught up to the anime, and there are some for the manga in general if you're not caught up. I would say at least be caught up to the start of Wano. Even if you will get spoiled on a couple minor things.
Yes. Oh, actually, there's a moment I'm thinking of right now in the very beginning of the movie where they mention something in regards to how far Luffy has come. And I guess if you're at that point and you haven't heard that, then I guess that could be a pretty massive spoiler. So, yeah. We got a bunch of donations from Dan DeMan, who donated $20, then $10, then $10, then $10, then $20, then $10, then $10. Wild. Saying, I just want to appreciate all of you coming on stream and sharing your thoughts on Film Red. It's an amazing time to be a One Piece fan. Great job, RogersBase, and shout out to everybody on the stream. At Hidden, I love the Hidden Marine trip, 10 out of 10. Also, you look like a snitch. Love the channel, brother. I don't know what the heck that means.
Because he's the Marine fit.
There you go. This one's directed at Zach, saying, "We got your greatness in the house. I love you, brother. Keep up the amazing streams, man." That was directed at Zach. This one's at Jay, going, "The Don, the great one, the Godfather, the future Hall of Famer. Need I say less?" with the flex emoji and then the little prayer emoji. So there you go. We have this one's going to Par, saying, "Your donation is a 20 because Par, your theories are second to none. Zorro is indeed a plant. We know who the mushroom is. LOL. I love your Luffy statue, by the way."
Dan Demand gave me this Luffy statue, so shout outs to you, Dan Demand.
This one.
Hey, before I forget, I'm sorry, Roger. I just wanted to say I actually have 4 billion with me here, so when we go over it, if you want visual, if you want to see the pages we're talking about, I can actually pull the pages.
That'd be awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem.
This one's actually directed at Randy, and it says, "Yo, I donated, but you left. So shout out to the queen of the house. LOL, love you, Randy. And by the way, amazing collection." We have this one at the One Piece Talk, saying, "The realist out there, much love, brother." And the realist was in all caps for that.
He already knows.
Out of here.
He already knows, bro.
Allegedly.
He already knows.
Finally, last but not least, this one was directed at Artur. It was an ellipses, and then it says, "GOAT." All capital letters. "We truly would not fully understand all of the translations without your amazing translations or input. So thank you for being a great part of the One Piece community," with the heart emoji and the fire emoji.
Thank you, man.
So excellent. All right. I think that takes care of all the donation parts for this first portion. So here is what I'm going to do. This is the moment you've been waiting for. There's going to be a lot of agendas. There's going to be a lot of things thrown around. If you do not want to be spoiled on One Piece Film Red, tune out right now. But I'm assuming we're probably not even going to get a viewer drop because I think most people want to hear this portion. So what I'm going to do, because I know people are going to complain, I'm going to throw a fat spoiler warning on the screen right now, so you can't miss. It's going right over Totski's face. Totski, you're not on camera, so you're just going to see it right now.
Yeah, all good.
Spoiler warning, all good. If you are not caught up, you have not seen Film Red, you don't want to be spoiled, tune out now. This is going to be the beginning of the spoiler section. So here we go. I'm going to give a 5-second warning, and then I'm going to jump right in with a massive, massive spoiler. So I'm going to say something massive right at the very beginning. You cannot complain. This is your warning. Okay, I'm giving you a second. 5.
My God.
4, 3, 2, 1. Is
Happy New
Uta dead
Year's.
at the end of this movie?
Yes,
Do you think
yes.
Uta's
He's
dead?
done. He's done.
Yes.
Okay.
Which wasn't like super apparent. Like I was.
It wasn't really clear.
Well, it was
Me and
funny
Larry
because
talking, I was like, she's dead, right? Like,
yeah, because all right, musical stuff aside, when she was in Shanks's arms and she was like, it was in her last breath, and like I thought she was gonna talk, but then she broke out into music. I was like, stop! And then Jay was just like, "Bro, she's dying," and I was like, "Oh God, I feel so bad now." But like it was,
she's dying.
I didn't like realize until we saw like them leaving, and then like Jay hitting me with the reality of like, "Wait, bro, we gotta be a little bit. We can't react like that on this one." I was like, "Oh shit!"
Because you get that moment with Shanks' ship going off, and then saying like Luffy wakes up and goes, "Where's Uta and where's Shanks?" And the ship's like already gone, and you see them in the distance, and she's already gone too by that point. Figuratively and literally. One thing I will say though is in that end credit portion where you see like the album being passed around the world, it's almost like one of those things that you hear about artists all the time, right? That like you're not fully appreciated until after you die. That's kind of how I took that end credit sequence where she's got her album, everyone's getting the new album, they're excited to listen to it, but in reality it's like she's not going to be there to experience it with everyone,
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say, because it's like, to me, that final scene, I loved it so much, because One Piece has all these themes about inherited will, about how you still live on through what you've done, through your dreams, through what you've created.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is just that ending just basically encapsulated the idea that Uta, even though she passed on, her will still lives on within her songs, and they still help inspire and help people, which, I feel is also kind of meta, because you could say the same for the songs for this movie, for people like us and all that stuff. stuff. And we see literally at the end, the final things we see in the movie before the post-credit scenes, the way it's ending the credits, we see Uta like kind of like smiling, like all these characters in the series have before dying. And I think it just kind of signifies that her will has been inherited through these songs, and she still lives on in Luffy and everyone else. And one day, perhaps her music will help change the world, all those things, you know. And I think for a One Piece story, that works really well.
Right on. So then the other thing I was going to bring up, and this goes right into the thing I reminded myself to bring up during this portion of the discussion, is in regards to which portions of this movie are canon. I'm going to make a hard read right now. I think by the end of One Piece, we are going to see Uta in the story alive. And the reason why I think this movie is kind of like the quote-unquote bad end version is like, I think this movie shows what would have happened if all the stuff that happens on the island, right? Top Musica actually happens. Luffy was there. You have the giant fight. She succeeds in, her grandmaster plan, all of that. She dies at the end of all of it. She's eating the mushrooms. I think all that stuff is not going to be canon to the story. I think her as a character is going to be canon, and we may not ever see her again in the story. And at that point, by the end of One Piece, we could be like, okay, well, maybe she just died off screen somewhere, and then you could maybe take parts of this as canon that sing things somewhat similar to what happens in this movie happen, right? She does Top Musica. She tries to stay awake. She ends up dying. She brings a lot of people with her. But then that opens up a whole can of worms.
She went home. Her planet needed her.
Right. Yeah, like is Top Musica canon?
That's exactly.
That's the thing.
Right,
literally
right,
summons
right.
the Demon King, right? So
There's
like,
no way Top Musica can't be canon.
Exactly.
It has to be like, that's a Dynastone thing.
If Robin didn't know about it, it's not canon.
Exactly. Which then leads you to believe that, like, if she never does that, and there is no Top Musica, then I imagine she's probably chilling on an island right now making music, and that Uta exists in the canon One Piece world, and she just never dies. She was on Shanks' ship, right? They maybe leave her somewhere to fulfill her dream of being a musician, and the album still exists and all that stuff happens, but the events of this film don't actually happen because Top Musica isn't a real thing.
So that's what I was getting to in the... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, sorry.
So this is what I was getting to in the beginning about like what is and isn't canon. Right. One of the things that I found really interesting about this film is when Uta declares herself the musician of the red-haired pirates, I found that really interesting because as we know from the jump, musician is someone that Luffy has wanted on his crew. He has said that from the get-go, but Shanks never had a musician. And if he learned everything about being a pirate from Shanks, where did he get that idea? So this idea that Uta is canon and that Luffy had a relationship with her and knew that she was a musician, that to me helps that little bit of Luffy characterization in the beginning, which I found super interesting.
I agree.
But then the further in that you get, the harder it becomes because like we're saying, let's assume everything that happens on, in the movie, everything that happens with Top Music and all that isn't canon. What happened to her? What is the point of her character outside of just being another childhood friend that Luffy had?
I think in that aspect, it would just be that she's just a celebrity, right? She's somebody that Luffy grew up with. They left and then ended up making a bunch of music and is now like a celebrity. And because there's no relationship to the core story, it would never come up. You know what I mean? Like she could just be off making her music. And the point of the character isn't to like have any real significance in the story beyond, maybe someone's listening to an Uta album or they show her like live streaming and singing or something. But I do think even if there's not a lot of story significance that we will end up seeing her in the manga at some point, like her actual... And I think Shiki's going to show up eventually too with all the rock stuff.
I hope so.
Shiki and Uta are probably the two big ones.
Especially be Easter eggs.
Yeah. Shiki will show up in a Rock's flashback for sure.
100%. Yeah.
Part of me feels like...
Sorry, can I say? The thing I want to say before Matt is that regarding Todd Musica, for example, I don't think that Todd Musica is going to be canon, like the character, but there's so many aspects of it that just tie with so many things in canon. Because, for example, Shanks mentioned the devil in chapter 19. Todd Musica has 3 skulls like oars or like Blackbeard. In my opinion, it also kind of looks a bit like Blackbeard. There's even the fact that it says that Todd Musica used its will to bring itself close to Uta, possibly just like the Nika fruit did with Luffy, right? And there's just so many aspects of Ton Musica. There was this detail that it took me so long to notice, but it's like on the music sheet of Ton Musica, it's very hard to see, but there's a symbol that looks very similar to Doflamingo's Jolly Roger. There are so many aspects to Todd Musica that I don't think the character necessarily is canon, but Oda is hinting at several things that he hid through this. Absolutely. And I was also thinking, just one last thing, that this has kind of changed a bit after the implication that Vegapunk was involved with it in the last chapter. But when I first saw the Lalasha incident in chapter 1060, isn't that almost practically Ton Musica? Because it's this giant floating thing that just descends all these lasers and obliterates an island, right? So like maybe it isn't that, but I think that Oda put a lot of ideas in this movie that he's then paying off in the manga in separate different ways, but he's hinting at them, sort of foreshadowing them through the character of Ton Musica.
What is, real quick, not to cut you off, what is this thing you just linked, Toadski? This is, an image of Top Musica.
Oh, yeah.
You're showing right now. Yeah.
Could I build off of
five skulls? Okay, yeah, 5 skulls instead of 3.
Form. The first form has 3 skulls, like Ors and Blackbeard.
Oh, right.
Got it. Okay.
Could I build off of what Arthur's saying here? I have something I want to add.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. I think my reason for thinking Uda is not canon is partially because of how Oda has treated, or how the movie characters have been handled relative to the story. So each movie villain seems to tie into the arc that's currently happening in the story. We have Strong World with Shiki. That was around the time, if I'm not mistaken, where, older legends were being introduced into the One Piece world, like Whitebeard, so on and so forth. We had Film Gold, which Tesoro tied directly into Doflamingo. Stampede, Bullet is kind of similar to Kaido in a lot of ways, the way he was introduced and all that. Ooh. So I feel like with Film Red, I look at Uda and I wonder, right? Because now we have this arc with Vegapunk, who is introduced to us as a female with all this high-tech gear strapped onto her, which is kind of similar to Uda's design. She had all like the headphones and all that stuff. Uda had all the stuff from her dream world, which is not reality, and we just got this chapter now of Vegapunk talking about what is and what isn't reality with the holograms and stuff like that, which is very similar to like the live performance of Uda with all the holograms and stuff. So I feel like maybe Uda is supposed to be setting us up for Vegapunk now in the story, and that's kind of the angle I'm taking on it. I feel like that's what her character is supposed to do. I don't think she's going to show up in the story too, because I'd feel a little bit redundant.
Yeah, for me, respect. I think like what Uta was trying, or what Oda and the entire point of like Uta's character is to set us up for the elements towards the last saga. Something that I get like as a reoccurring comment on a lot of my earlier videos, like Elemental Hockey videos, is that will Oda introduce like these power structures this late into the game? Now, one of the things I would say is that I think that Film Red shows where the ending of One Piece will lie in, where it's like it might not be taught Musica, but the elements that we're talking about will be there. For example, we saw Shanks with the flaming sword, and like that level of thing was like something that people didn't like quite think that would be a normal place in One Piece, but then go from the fire sword to a demon king manifestation behind him. And it's like, if we're introducing that kind of thing, then maybe that's the explanation of Ashura. Maybe that's the explanation of the Grim Reaper that Zoro saw. Like those kinds of elements are being introduced. And something that Artur was also saying was like, a question, I forgot who asked, but it was at the after party. They were saying like, is the Nika fruit necessary for Laugh Tale? And something that I would say is it is a similar situation as Luffy's fruit, where it's like maybe you need to be the right person. You have to have the fruit, just like Uta has the Sing Sing fruit. And then on top of that, then the music followed her to wherever she was, and it came in front of her, similar to maybe what the Straw Hat is, or maybe that's like Luffy's luck and all that stuff. And then you combine all of those things and you get this end game connection of like a taught Musica type of situation.
That's interesting you bring that up too, because I feel like you hit on a good point in regards to like Luffy and to Uta, right? That like if you have a devil fruit that matches your own strengths and your own personality, then obviously that devil fruit's going to be stronger. Like Uta's obviously a great singer, and so if you give a great singer the song fruit or whatever her fruit's called, right? Obviously she's going to be super strong. Same way that like Luffy wants to be free, he's determined, he's laughing, and like it makes sense for him to be super strong with Nika's fruit.
Right.
Or,
And there's like
Doflamingo is really cunning and creative and stuff. And so when he has the string fruit and he's able to manipulate people, it makes a lot of sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Or you could get somebody with no fashion sense like Kinemon and give him the fruit that he has.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly.
Imagine this movie,
So the other
instead of Uta having the fruit, it's Luffy. Minami no Shimawa. You know,
I mean, it makes sense.
And
It's just
if you look at
Luffy would
Ace,
never get anything done. Yeah.
if you look at Ace, he has the fire fruit. He has a fire personality. Doflamingo is a manipulator. He has the string fruit.
Yeah.
You have Kid, who carries around trash. You have Marco, who's a gun. He's a punching bag. It just makes sense.
Lovely.
Wait, I'm with Larry. Can we just talk about for one quick second? Law fans, we're eating good in this movie because our boy is all over the place, and guess who's not in this fucking film? Kid.
All I'm saying.
Speak.
Kobe fans.
I prefer not to speak.
Wow.
Kobe fans, man. Kobe was absolutely incredible in this movie. Like better than the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
Bardo fans eating good.
Oh yeah. Of
The
all the
few other
characters,
fans
that
eating
would
good.
have been
My manga
important.
fans eating good.
Like Bluno showing
Yes.
up, being
Shout out to
such a
Bluno.
part of this movie.
Shout out to all four of you Bruno fans out there.
The Blue cameo was welcome. It was nice to see him again.
Yo,
It
Roger,
was cool to see Bluno, but I think the weird thing was like the emphasis on how useful this door power is going between the different worlds, and then him turning into the little chibi thing along with the Sunny and along with like I don't even remember. I literally just saw the movie Thursday. I don't even remember the other little chibi things. I remember the Sunny and I remember Bluno. Beppo, that's right, Beppo. It was really cute. Yeah, if you're a Beppo fan, you'll like Beppo.
It's okay. It's easy to forget Beppo.
Yeah.
I just want to put out
I'm not sure.
Wow.
I'm not too sure if I'm missing something,
Sorry,
but
that
like,
was funny. That was
but like,
funny.
what was the reason of Khalifa being in the film? Was she like just recon?
She just showed up.
yeah.
man.
We're like right at the edge,
Just
right?
saying, I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm here.
yeah. Like
here too.
Khalifa just felt like she
Remember
didn't need
me?
to be there.
I'll just put this out there. In a month, when the screenings happen, in one theater, somewhere out there, there's gonna be one guy whose favorite character is Bluno, and he's gonna pop.
He's popping off, man. Bluno fans are eating good.
I'm so happy for that one person. I'm so happy for him or her.
You know, but see, that's actually probably my favorite aspect of this entire film.
Yeah.
Is the emphasis on Kobe and Bluno specifically, because that's what felt like One Piece to me. Like the way Oda would shoehorn some random side character like Bluno into the story and then make them effective again, like in Impel Down, like in Marineford. So it was like Kobe's like that. They were probably my two favorite characters in the entire film.
Yeah,
which is crazy. And also shout out to Vice Admiral Mamanga. He was showing out too.
Oh yeah, for sure. No.
I'm a manga for years.
The
That's
point
my
that you
jam.
just brought up too, Randy, is I think a big reason as to why I would put this one above Stampede. Because I think there's a lot of characters that do things in Stampede and are fighting in that final battle and will show up and have a couple scenes. But none of them, to me, feel as integral to the story as the ones that show up in this one do. Like Barto, that whole squad of like Barto, Law, Brule, Oven. Like, there's a lot of Oven in this movie. Again, if you're an Oven fan, you're going to be very, very happy. Oven shows up a lot.
That's another random thing.
Bluno,
Katakuri
Kobe.
Shanks moment was like,
let's not
that was
talk about
gas.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Katakuri thing, I would say, goes on the side of that's kind of BS. He shows up and doesn't really do anything, right?
Fan service.
For me,
Shanks goes like, all right, bro, we get it. You can see.
Everyone is here
in this movie. Yeah.
I think we all gotta be
I
real
know
with
that guy.
ourselves. I think we gotta be real with ourselves, bro. If Pell ain't dead, Uda ain't dead. All right, let's just put that out there.
I don't know.
Bro, not me agreeing with Larry
It's
again.
not Puta. It's like,
her name doesn't start with a P. It's Willa P, bro, not Willa P.
Right.
bro.
That's all I'm saying, man.
Uta
Where
P
Pell at,
musician,
man?
yeah.
Did someone say Puda in here? That's messed up, bro.
That's in the spoiler. In this my
That's
spoiler
bad,
community, apparently that's what they're calling this, the film of that. And I'm like,
Really?
okay, yeah. So because I have
man.
a spoiler section in my Discord that I don't interact with, but once I watch the movie, I finally go in, and then so I gave my thing, and then a bunch of people were saying that this is what people call it. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's
messed up, dude.
a little far. That's a little far.
Really rad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that is far. I agree.
I think one of my
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say one of my like biggest issues with this is I feel like there's so many ways, like if you're going to say that the film is canon, you know, just manipulate it that way. Like we have this stretch in between Wano and Egghead where, you know, now Jinbei is finally with the crew. where it easily could have fit into there, with the exception of Kobe, right? Because obviously the events of what happened in 1060 would be prior to that. I just wish it could have easily just fit in there, and instead of continuing to call him the fifth emperor, it was like, that's one of the emperors of the sea.
Yeah,
they already teased, year 5. So.
I think it's because the timing of the movie is supposed to be during this. I guess this is why it's also not canon, is because it wouldn't make sense in the timeline. But it's supposed to be in between the raid and when they're on Wano, because there's that significant amount of time, and so that's why it doesn't make any sense. Because how would that ever happen? Which is why,
Big Mom's just chilling in the film.
Yeah, that's why Big Mom is there. Versus if it's after Onigashima, it would never make sense because Big Mom shouldn't be in the picture like that.
Wait, could you repeat again what the chunk of time? It's before the raid.
Yeah, before the raid.
While they're training.
Part of Wano?
Yeah, but Jimmy up until the raid.
So wasn't Big Mom there already before the raid anyway? Like Okabore Town and all that stuff?
Right. She shows up.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird thing, because I was just like, that was what was making the most sense prior. I remember talking to Hidden about this on like a stream. Like, the timeline is not what makes sense, and I think that's the same thing with Strong World too. It wouldn't make sense time-wise, but I think it's supposed to be like after Thriller Bark or something like that, when Strong World is supposed to happen. Which obviously
that actually does kind of fit up, because after Thriller Bark, it's just you have that stretch of time before they land at the Flying Fish Riders, so it can kind of fit in there, and actually serves as like a further exposition of Brook, which is my favorite thing. Because otherwise, it's just he joins and then he gets blasted away right after joining.
I think with Strong World, I think the thing that most people went to was Zoro being injured after Thriller Bark, but in Strong World, I don't think.
He still attacked against the Rosy Life Riders, for example. He still fought and attacked. It's just that
but it was a notable injury even when he fought Kuma in Sabaody, but that wasn't a plot element at all in Strong World.
After fighting the Pacifista, he was pushed to the limit and his injuries appeared. But just quickly defeating Indigo wasn't a problem for him in the movie.
Right, I know, but in the context of Strong World, where he was pushed to the limit, it wasn't a plot point. Which after Thriller Bark,
to the limit against Indigo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the extent. I mean, he fought Shiki. They all fought Shiki and got cracked, right? Like that was the whole beginning part of that.
He got defeated,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, but meaning that injury element, you would imagine that would be a plot point in Strong World if that timeline made sense, which it was a plot point in Sabaody, right?
Yeah.
So
wait, you said what?
Jay's like, I heard one thing. I heard Artur say power level, and I heard Jay perk up and go.
Oh, we're going to talk about Shanks getting beat up by civilians?
I want to pass this off to you, Jay.
So now we're at this topic, and I think I know what you're about to do. Yes, we're here.
Because we got out of this movie, and Jay walks up to me and goes, all right, general thoughts. And we sort of go over all the things that we were talking about in the spoiler-free thing. And he goes, okay, but the admirals? And that was the first thing I got to me. And so I want to pass the microphone to you. How did you feel about the representation of Kizaru and Fujitora and Akainu in this movie?
I have a few mildly aggressive statements to make based on this. And you know, I'm going to direct this specifically to two people. You know, Matt, I love you dearly, so you know this already. This is all love. And then Arthur as well to you as well. You know, when we talk about narratives and how narratives are always going to drive power scaling, the narrative of Fujitora getting one Conqueror's Haki shake from Shanks and saying, oh shit, we got to leave, when they're clearly outnumbered and Kizaru's there, to me, narratively hurts the admirals when we shouldn't have them be narratively bitched like that. It's disrespectful to the narrative itself. Even if you don't like power scaling, it's disrespectful.
That was so bad. I just genuinely laughed. Like, it's like genuinely funny.
The narrative is Luffy. The only power level that the admirals need to be compared to are the Straw Hats. It doesn't matter if Shanks can body the admirals. He's not the protagonist.
No, I disagree with that, because at the end of the day, there's got to be happenings around the world that are outside of the Straw Hats, right? And I think that's what's important. Because a lot of people don't power scale to the Straw Hats. I always tell people, if you're power scaling people like Crocodile and Lucci to Luffy, his fight with Luffy, Katakuri, it's a waste of time. There's no reason to argue that. Now, when it comes to admirals and Yonkos, say Marineford, for example, Akainu and Whitebeard, that's where you can get into the discussions and discuss the narrative of the world outside of the Straw Hats, because there is a narrative of the world of One Piece outside of the Straw Hats.
Jay.
But so what this narrative is telling us is Shanks is at a level above the admirals. They don't want to fuck with him. The narrative is telling you that.
And actually, I am going to back up, Matt, on this as well, because in the story, the canon story right now, that's literally been told to us. You have Green Bull show up at Wano Country. He gets scared by Shanks. Obviously, it was a moment that a lot of people disagreed with. I'm not saying it necessarily is good or bad.
Disagreements, that's the issue.
But Green Bull shows up, and then obviously Shanks has the hockey, and he's like, you know what? This is maybe too much for me.
He literally put his hands
up. He leaves. He literally does.
I mean, not to defend the admirals, but Fuji did say that like we shouldn't fight because there's too many civilians around. So that is one thing. That is
don't be using those excuses, man.
It is an excuse.
Excuses.
He didn't say nothing. There was casually killing civilians.
The last thing I will say about this is Kabaji is a Yonko commander, so shut the fuck up with your power scaling conversations.
No, we're not doing
3.
I don't want to.
Oh no!
So Matt, you know Buggy's a meme. We don't include Buggy in power scaling conversations. We don't.
Why? You don't get to pick.
He's literally a Yonko.
And Yonko commanders are the basis for these power scaling conversations, which they are.
Yeah.
You got to include Kabaji.
Let me explain.
Where's the Yonko commander color spread?
In the panels, we're like, here, we can't tell Buggy at all, so let Mihawk and Crocodile take care of this because they were afraid. So technically, the Yonko commanders that you're talking about were like
Mihawk and Crocodile. That's who the real commanders are. It's just like more for PR. And then I'll put it into this context because I think when this what are you gonna say, Arthur? What?
The thing that I wanted to ask before is that, Jay, considering that we saw Green Bull at Wano getting that scared of Shanks by his haki, are you sure that what you're saying this is hurting is the admirals, or is it hurting your headcanon?
It's hurting headcanon for sure, but I'll say this way. I'll put it this way. Everything that we say in this story is headcanon. We do not know exactly what Oda is thinking under any circumstances.
Now we know Yonko over Admiral.
Well, hold on. Well, true, but anything that we say in regards to the story is not from Oda's mouth and it's not from Oda's pen. Everything that we say is headcanon. So I want that to be using headcanon as an excuse is a weak argument. And one thing I also want to mention is when it comes to these debates about power scaling, all of it is headcanon. All of it is discussion. All of it is mainly fun because at the end of the day, we're all smart enough to realize Oda's going to write who wins no matter what. We're all very cognizant of that. One second. Hold on, I gotta finish this real quick because I'm cooking right now. So then after that, after that, when it comes to the discussion of power scaling, it's more about predictions, seeing how this is gonna go. If you're wrong, you're wrong. But while we don't know definitively, we can have the debate and the discussions just for the sake of debate and discussions. Now, if it gets toxic, that's up to the people that are having the discussions. But for the most part, it's more about the debate. It's more about what facts you can bring to the table, who has a more likely argument to be correct. So when you are correct, it's more fun. That's really where the whole agenda comes from.
Jay, you are correct there, Jay. But so the point is, the only thing we have to go off of is Oda's pen, like you said, which is the narrative. So if the narrative tells us Kizaru doesn't want to fuck with Shanks, guess what? Shanks is more powerful than Kizaru.
Yeah.
We don't disagree with that, but at the same time, you can project where the narrative is going, which is why we have things like theories, because you're projecting where the narrative is going and using your headcanon. Now, Arthur, you're a theorist. So are you telling me that you shouldn't make any theories because you should only focus on what Oda tells you directly, or you can project the narrative based on what you think is going to happen? Just like
those are two different arguments, my boy. Those are two different arguments,
my boy. I think they're the same. Because I can get hints of, say, Shanks running away from Kizaru and think, is Shanks really that much stronger than Kizaru?
Yes.
Then you have a debate around it. Then all of a sudden you go to Marineford and you see Kizaru casually fighting with Whitebeard. Are we just going to say that Whitebeard is stronger than Shanks as a result of that? Do we have evidence to prove that?
But I think
do we have evidence to prove that?
In terms of what's in the film, right? Like what you actually see in the movie and in the canon story, I think the Shanks power scaling thing shouldn't even be an issue, because I think definitively everybody in this call agrees Shanks is stronger than the admirals, right?
I agree. I just think feel like
I think deal with a story that
everybody's in agreement. I think the argument was getting skewed a little bit, but I think the problem that I think someone might have watching this movie versus somebody who like is reading the manga regularly versus a casual viewer, right, is that there are moments in this film, now that we're in spoilers we could talk about this, where admiral level characters and very strong characters are getting bodied by literally fodder people under Uta's control when she does like the mind control thing or the dream thing or whatever, where literally they're standing there, Fujitora or Kizaru, whoever, you guys could correct me, whoever it was in that moment, but like there are 3 civilians just chilling on these characters and they're like, I can't do anything, they're too strong, they're holding me back.
They don't want to hurt them.
They don't want to hurt them. In the topic of the admirals, it makes sense, right? They don't want to hurt them, but like, some members of Shanks' crew.
They don't want to hurt them. They specifically said, "Do not touch the civilians. We are not going to hurt them over your dead bodies."
But the problem is,
I think true.
I think when it comes to power scaling, though, like my thing that I always go to, and especially if you're talking about Kizaru, is just if Oda wants to. Right, because we also deal with a story where devil fruits can negate other abilities.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, so it's like you have situations where Mr. 3 was an amazing counter to Magellan, who washed the floor with, Luffy and Blackbeard, just everybody that he touched. So it's like if we had a situation where Kizaru was up against Foxy and Foxy just caught him off guard, like that's going to negate his his speed. So I don't know.
God.
I just
back
away from
that's cat.
So one thing I'll say about that as well is that's also the beauty
slow fruit man of
it's the beauty of matchups, right? It's like the beauty. It's like the beauty of matchups. Like when you look at Enel versus Luffy, for example, right? Like that is just like severe hard counter, right? And I also think that is also part of the power scaling discussions is the matchups, because then one common not excuse but a common a point that I hear people bring up when they go against power scaling is Sugar, right? Sugar should be able to beat anybody just because of her devil fruit, right? Yes. That I understand. And there's characters like that who are just there. Yeah, they're just there to break the story. I mean, Caesar and his gas thing taking out Air Pocket and choking Luffy out. Like, under no circumstances will Luffy ever lose to Caesar. But in that moment in time, there is a power that can have that work.
And I think that is. Oh, go ahead. You finish your thought, but that is the perfect transition into the next thing I kind of want to talk about. So go ahead.
And I'm only gonna have one more just minuscule point to go back to the original discussion about admirals and Yakos. I guess the only issue I have, because at the end of the day, the narrative is correct. Shanks is stronger than Kizaru. It's clear, right? Arthur and Matt are 100% correct in that stance. My issue is that Don't quit me saying Matt is right. This clip was. It's just that with the admirals and the stature that they have, I would just hope that Kizaru. It's very similar to the Ben Beckman moment in Marineford where he puts his hands up and then all of a sudden he just goes back to doing whatever he's doing.
We got an exact recreation of that too.
Exact recreation. Like Kizaru's like, all right, I'm done trolling. Like I'm done. It's just that it's for the presentation of the admirals to be the strongest force in the Marines. You would like them to show a little bit more resistance towards a minor conqueror's hockey flex, because they have to be the ones to fight these Yonko at least, toe to toe for a little bit, So that's
something I will say in defense of your point, Jay. Something that I'll play devil's advocate on from a character perspective. I would love if Kizaru has backed out of all of these fucking fights. And then when we really get into it and shit hits the fan, Kizaru just starts bodying people when he becomes really interested in something.
That's not part of his character.
I think that's going to happen. I generally think that's going to happen.
No. That's not.
I mean, this is the same man that said he would pull up on Big Mom and Kaido.
Wait, Zach, what did you say?
And I was just about to say that.
He doesn't want to pull it out. People going, wait, real quick. Zach, what were you going to say?
I was just making a quick point. Like Kizaru also said that he was ready to pull up to Wano when Big Mom and Kaido were also there. So there's just a little bit of conflicting narratives that we're getting out of that as well.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to point out too. That we have narratively, this guy was like, "Yo, I'm gonna just solo the Beast Pirates, the Big Mom Pirates, Big Mom and Kaido," but then he sees Shanks and he's like, "Yo, hold up, yo." My bad. I mean to act like that.
Okay,
I just
so
wanted
Kizaru is the Larry of the story. He talks
Chill
big.
out.
Oh
But
my
don't you guys
god!
think that-
I love this
the other thing-
bromance that's been created.
The
Yo,
other thing I want to
beautiful.
bring up, though, on that topic is, and again, we're getting, I guess, a little off of it, but in terms of Shanks, I think Kizaru saying, I'm ready to pull up to fight Kaido and Big Mom if you tell me to, doesn't necessarily negate him being scared of Shanks. It's just Shanks is that guy, right? Shanks is on that level so far above everybody else, because you see it in this movie multiple times and in the story now too, that he is that guy when it comes to hockey, that his hockey is unmatched. And that goes into a whole different discussion about like devil fruit powers versus hockey powers and which power set is stronger. But I think like realistically, if you are the strongest devil fruit user versus the strongest hockey user, maybe Kizaru has a certain amount of information where he goes, I'm fine to go up against these strong devil fruit users, but when it comes to this really strong hockey user who I don't fully understand, I can't mess with that. You know what I mean?
This is the thing too. This is the thing that Oda be lying all the time, bro.
So hold on,
Yeah,
wait,
but
go
I
to
think
Arthur real quick. Go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, on one hand, I think that Kizaru is someone who really relies on his fruit, because even Zephyr mentioned that. And the thing that I wanted to mention is that specifically, I don't know if this will add fuel to the fire in a bad way, but the volume that came with the movie specifically mentioned, for example, that Beckman has such good haki that even a Logia like Kizaru couldn't oppose him when held at gunpoint at Marineford. The book just said this. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think
even
the two moments in which he's been scared are Shanks and Ben Beckman. So that again, like, adds to the narrative of Shanks' crew. You know. Wait, what were you showing, Hidden Island?
I got this on display while Arthur was talking about it.
Oh, about Beckman. There you go.
exactly what I got.
Because we know Beckman is the guy.
He's the guy.
He's a Chad. He's a Chad.
That guy.
But what I was trying to say is
on
like,
the topic. I was gonna say on the topic of hockey, how we were talking about Sugar earlier, we did have that moment in Onigashima where Law was like, I can't just use my powers like willingly like that because the hockey is too strong. So Oda did balance that out where like if Sugar tries that on Kaido, it's not gonna work because his hockey is too strong. So there is that balance when we talk about Devil Fruits versus hockey.
True. That's true.
Yeah.
yo, and listen, narrative don't mean everything. All right, because Oda be lying all the time. He told us that Kaido 1v1 bet on him, and what happened? Luffy beat him.
Well,
You know what I'm saying?
I disagree with that. So
and then
I'm not letting that slide.
Hold on.
I just have to say something to that Sugar.
Let Roger say his story.
Luffy is the protagonist of the story. If you're reading One Piece and thought
Luffy
at
did the
any
good.
point in One Piece that by the end of the story, Luffy would not be the quote-unquote best or the top or the strongest or whatever, you're reading the wrong story. Like, this is a shonen manga at the end of the day. There's no situation in which
It's 19. Like, it's crazy.
Luffy did get knocked out.
And he lost multiple times leading up to it.
He did.
Even then,
getting him a new power. Right.
even then, when Ben Beckham told him, yo, Kizaru, not to move, what did Kizaru do after that?
He moved.
He ended up attacking Luffy anyway, right? So even if like he couldn't stand the Beckham, like he still took action. So anything like this is what I be saying. Like Oda says one thing and he always shows another.
And
I feel like it was obvious.
He's sitting there. He's like, stop calling him Beckham. It's Beckman. Don't do it.
This is football.
It's triggering me. I'm a big soccer watcher.
Listen, man.
Whenever I hear someone say Brooks,
Larry, you're not entirely wrong. I think your Luffy versus Kaido example is flawed because, as Roger pointed out, that's the protagonist. So Oda setting up an unbeatable obstacle to be beaten by the protagonist, that's narrative 101, homie.
Right.
But
needed to get
Oda
jumped,
does
bro.
lie, which is why, bro.
My point is,
I want to hear
that's
this. Wait. Let me finish.
He does. No, he does. But so I think in that space is what I was saying to Jay's point of there's room for Kizaru to be crazy powerful when he actually decides to get involved in something.
When he decides not to be lazy.
Yes,
right.
He is that lends to the character. Motherfucker is lazy, but when he gets involved, he's gonna get involved. So we have to go with the narrative. It's all we have. Oda lies, quote unquote, sure, and so there's room for things to change. But until we know, that's all we've got to go on.
Yonko's over Admiral.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I feel like Oda's just not ready to give us the full showing of the admirals yet, which is why we keep getting these moments. We keep getting these moments where it's like, "Hey, Kizaru, stop right there," and he's like, "Oh, I can't do anything yet because the script doesn't let me."
And actually, that is the perfect segue. That is the perfect segue into the next thing to talk about in this movie, right? Bringing it back to actually film Red itself is, I think that's the other thing while watching this is like Oda's not fully ready to show us everything Shanks' crew can do, because there's moments in this, and I don't know if you guys had the same sort of like reaction when you get and I forgot his name, but the dude with like the screaming devil fruit power.
Yeah, and then they stop him.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, I want to know more about this.
No, we're gonna save that for a later chapter.
And he's screaming. It's like you're not gonna show the full. Or another thing is like, I forgot the name of the character. The monkey. There's like the guy with the pet monkey on the crew.
Yeah,
Monster. Right.
He's a goat.
Monster.
That monkey is goated, bro.
He pairs Owen's attack, where you have that like back-to-back in this final section of the movie where they're all doing like parallel attacks, and you have Owen going in with this heat drill, and then all of a sudden this monkey is drilling into
I think
am I right? I read something online that said that they are the musicians of the crew.
Yeah. The volume 4 billion, as far as I know, fills in a ton of
which negates Uta anyway. I don't know.
What were you saying?
Yeah, because you asked me about it previously, Roger. The things that the volume covers is, on one hand, it covers a bit the abilities of and like the positions of the red hair pirates, and mentions things like the positions in the crew, right? Like how like Lekiru, I think, is like the cook, like Hongo is the doctor, and then Bunk Punch and Monster are the musicians and stuff. After Root, of course, but the thing, it also kind of goes into the power levels, and we get to see some of that in the movie as well, which wasn't as elaborated upon in the film, I guess, because there's the whole thing with like Shanks being able to stop the future sight of other people, which is sort of alluded at with Katakuri, but we don't see it as much in the film, right? And then on top of that, beyond that, there's also some elaboration on the, like what you mentioned before, finding the child, right? Shanks' past, which I feel the movie maybe glazed over a bit too quickly, because Otis it's mentioned that that's God Valley, right? And that was Roger finding Shanks at God Valley, which if the movie had only just mentioned the island by name, probably would have helped a lot more. Those are basically the main takeaways.
Yeah, I'm glad that you also mentioned that too, because that was something that I thought was the case watching this. Like I hadn't known that little tidbit. When you see Roger open up the treasure chest or whatever, and you see Shanks in it, I thought, oh, okay, this has to be God Valley. But then I kind of questioned myself, and then when we were all talking at the after party thing, that's when I realized, like, oh, okay, no, that is definitely what they're showing. And I agree. I think that it would have helped the film if they had just said something in that moment, like clarifying that it's God Valley. But if I'm remembering this correctly, that moment when you see it in the film, there's like the discussion about how they found Uta, right? It's like the parallel of Uta ends up on the ship, and then that's when you see Shanks, because he has the flashback to like how he was found by Roger. Other thing I wish we would have gotten this movie is like where Uta really is from, like some type of explanation of like what that island was, because
it's mentioned in the volume too.
Oh, it is mentioned in the volume. All right.
Can we go back to the Shanks thing for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
That's a canon tease.
Yes.
The fact that they didn't say that was God Valley, that's so purposeful. Because if that is where Roger found Shanks, he's not going to reveal that information in a movie.
No.
That to me was like he's making parallel to Uta. She's the focus of the movie, but here's a little tease for Shanks' backstory that's coming.
Yeah, the one thing that was a little bit beyond a tease was the last name, right? So they told us
that's the thing.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Dragon, Figurland, Shanks. Like it's worded in a way where it's heavily implied that Shanks could be a celestial dragon from God Valley, which is kind of like a really big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
Right. So it went, what was the name? Fargland or something like that?
Figurland,
Yeah. So like that was a little bit beyond just like a manga tease or anime tease, because that's not something that I figure we'll get for even a while, I would imagine. If Oda decides to drop that soon, that's an interesting thing. But to have that in the movie, that might be like a whiplash moment, because it was such a fast thing too. I think it was the Dora.
They really glossed over it. Yeah, I really wanted you to miss it.
Isn't that the same as the Laugh Tale reveal that we were talking about in Stampede?
Well, no,
like sometimes
Laugh Tale was more shown.
Like the end credit stinger, basically, of Stampede, if I'm remembering.
That was like the whole
the Laugh Tale thing was
film, really.
So do stingers not count tell that to the MCU.
No. Stingers no. You misunderstand me. Obviously, stingers count. What I'm saying is like he saved that moment for the end of the film, whereas like this moment with Shanks is not at the end of the movie. It's like thrown in the middle of a sequence with Uta.
Right. The laugh tail thing was like the whole point of the film, whereas like the Figureland stuff was like glossed over randomly.
Right. And like the treasure chest moment, I almost missed. Like Jay's like slapped me in the middle of the movie because I was reaching for my drink, and then he's like, "Yo, bro, what?" And then I saw it.
Like, I really love the way that like the whole Figureland thing is done, because it feels like a manga chapter where like suddenly the Gorosei appear, they drop this massive thing, but suddenly they talk about another thing and we move on. That's very canon. In that
it was a minor
I don't
thing.
think that the placement of information in a movie can determine its level of importance.
Can I be honest? I would have preferred if the movie didn't have the Figureland name drop. I would have preferred if the scene towards the end with, like, you guys know the treasure chest finding a baby thing that you were. Yeah, so I'm fine with that being in the movie. I feel like that's a vague enough detail that you can reveal in the movie as canon. It
actually applies to the movie plot still.
Yeah, it applies to the movie plot, but like a name drop for Shanks, if that actually is his name, I would have much rather that come from
like,
the
it's
manga,
random, right? And another thing, I wanted to say this earlier, that's kind of minor, but you still have to wonder like how canon is that because of Oda's involvement, is Kobe interacting with Bluno, where like Sword and Shield, like they very clearly know each other. It's like, so is that actually
that was interesting.
That was super interesting.
But there is still like an antagonist. But there's still like an antagonistic nature where they don't usually work together.
Right.
And but I think one of the most interesting things for me was actually Lucci's proximity to the Gorosei throughout the film. You know, like we don't normally see
people interact.
Like anybody, you know, like we've seen a Kainu in there, you know, like all right, the Fleet Admiral. Yeah. But Lucci was in there. And I mean that just goes to my headcanon where I just want Lucci to be the one that killed Cobra. And I'm like, if they wanted that to happen, then you know maybe
they would call him Lucci.
Then Lucci could legitimately be their dog in the government, like go and do this.
Yeah, and
doesn't that just speak to the importance of CP0?
Oh, definitely. And it's, I mean, 100%. You can see that in the story right now with Egghead Island, right? Is like obviously Cyberpol, as of the most recent chapter, they are on their way over there right now. You know, with the Seraphim Kuma and all that stuff. So I feel like the way things are ramping up in the story right now, and we do know we're in the final saga, these answers are going to come sooner rather than later. I think that's the big exciting thing watching this movie is like those little teases that were in there, like Shanks' name, his backstory at God Valley, Lucci in proximity to the Gorosei. Like this is all stuff we are going to know within the next 3 years. This isn't a situation where like something gets revealed in the story and we're like, oh, we'll see this 8 years from now. This is soon. This is soon. Like that's exciting.
And also, I think like,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think like another part of that things that are going to be revealed is all the power stuff. And I want, you know, the scene that Randy was referencing, I want to clear something up because I was a little confused about this. I was like, is this a plot hole or is this like indicative of something? But you know how like Uta's powers, the Sing Sing fruit, it was supposed to be that the people listening fall under this you know, trance, and it's like even someone like Luffy fell under the trance, right? Like I don't remember if he was like aware of it or something. It just felt like widespread. If you listened to it, even if you had hockey, you'd succumb to it. And it was interesting to me because we got the scenes of everyone throughout the world listening to it, but wasn't the Gorosei also listening to the music as well? And they were just like completely like absolved from it, and that's why Lucci was like trying to turn it off because like top musica was there. And I wanted to get like that clarification. Was it like muted for them?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how they watched a broadcast from the dream world in the first place. How does that work?
They also said don't even try turning it off because we've already heard it.
Yeah.
True. Okay.
No. Like, specifically, they mentioned that they muted the stream, and you can see during the Gorosei scenes you cannot hear music because they're only watching it. But then when Todd Music is activated, the muting doesn't work anymore because I guess like the power just gets out of control, and they're like, "There's no point now. Todd Music has been unleashed. It's too late."
Got it. Yeah, I think that was like a part of the moment. That's like in the third act that Roger's talking about, where things were kind of fast paced, and I felt like that was something that could have been a little bit more emphasized just on screen time because I missed it and I was paying attention to the Gorosei scenes. But like you said, like if the music being muted, they muted it, then that makes sense. I was just kind of wondering about how they were going to go about that, because one of the other parts was what Randy just said. They said that they've heard it before, and that was another one of those sort of canon things that I feel like is important, where something I talk about on my channel a lot is that I feel like there's multiple ways to get to like a laugh tale or like a void century like cornerstone thing, and one of them is through music. For like, one of the things that I've always questioned is like, even a pirate crew like Brooks, who is just basically a band on a ship going through having concerts and making people smile, they still deemed that as pirating. They still wanted to eliminate that, and this story kind of gives validation as to why, because the point of Uta's thing was like, if you are a good enough singer, this music might find you and you might unlock top musica, and so that might explain
One
why
Piece
the
is
Gorge
just
say
Footloose.
Yeah, I real quick, because I'm going to forget this, and there's no other time to bring this up. You just mentioned Brooke. And one quick thing I want to say is, back in, this would have been July, during Anime Expo, right? I hosted that Film Red panel with Shimizu-san and with some of the English voice actors. And one of the key things that we showed off during this panel was Brooke's outfit. And like, one of the questions that we brought up was, what importance is Brooke going to have to this story? Because obviously so much of Film Red is revolved around music. Like, what is Brooke going to do? Is he going to have a duet? I think that was probably my biggest disappointment with this movie, is that Brooke, as the musician of the Straw Hats, really doesn't do anything beyond the same like 3 or 4 shots with different backgrounds of him doing the attack where like it's the cold and he shuts the sword.
And he sang a little bit.
And he sings a little bit, and he's on the music notes.
He sang like 3 notes.
Music notes, right? Like,
yeah, which is like an exact similar.
He's the Straw Hats musician, like,
right, and I that's my big thing, right? Is obviously he plays an importance in the story when you realize like, oh, he's the one who could read music, and so Kobe's holding the music positions up to him and like showing him, oh, could you read all of this for us so we can figure out how to fight her? But beyond that, like, he doesn't really do anything.
It really diminished. That scene diminished it for me too.
This a 10 of 10.
Oh, easy.
On top of
Matt,
that scene that you're talking about where they're like, read the music, and Brooke, it was just like he couldn't, but I was just like, oh man, make him like a musical genius and he can like know what the whole spread is without seeing
I was waiting for him to go into his soul form, and then look at everything, and then sing everything from his soul form. I was sitting there like, when is this going to happen? It just never did.
Which then, does that mean
I can't see it? Yes, you can, Brooke.
Yeah. You bringing up the soul form thing also brings up a good point too, because like, how much of the devil fruits did that bar of music negate? Because they're obviously stuck on there. A lot of them can't do anything.
Man. That is such a broken power.
Yeah, but like the soul thing, like you said, he should have just been able, because he's obviously still up there. A lot of the other characters that are in their devil fruit forms, they were not negated. It's not like Chopper gets thrown up there and is just a regular reindeer again. Like, he's still Chopper. So
like, Cody had a lot of really great moments in this movie.
We talked about how strong.
What would his soul form would have done? That's we talked about how power.
So to answer that, right? Kobe had a lot of great moments in this movie, but he didn't necessarily need to be the one that's like, hey, I figured this out. If Brooke, while he was on, that musical note that Uta had, if he just used his soul form and then went out and looked at everything and then had that realization himself as a musician and then started singing everything and everybody fell down, that would have been a fantastic Brooke moment.
Or not just that, like, if the emphasis is the power of music that was hidden away, and the point of it being a great musician, you could access that. It would have been nice, I feel like, if Brooke got more emphasis when it came to understanding the lore of top musica, where it was like Robin looking at the stuff, but everyone was engrossed in a battle that like no one got the details except for the viewer. Whereas like Brooke could have been really important to that aspect, like, oh, this is a music thing, I know this, like, I've heard of this. Like, that's one thing that plays on Brooke's character in the first place, is that he's a character removed from the timeline, and he has knowledge that most of the characters in the current timeline don't even know. Not even Shanks would know a lot of the things that Brooks does know, despite like not talking about like the Void Century stuff, obviously, but musical things. And there was a lot of moments that could have added that, on top of having top musica being like this avatar behind you that like is this monster. Brooke has that too, and I don't, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like that last part it was really quick, and I would love to rewatch Film Red to really dissect it. But I feel like he didn't pull out Soul King, right? He didn't pull out his ghost.
I don't remember. No.
And now that I'm looking at the picture that Artur put in the chat, also, like, it looks exactly like the Soul King form, like the way that's positioned with the arms.
This is the first form of top musical with the 3 skulls he was referencing earlier, right?
So speaking on the power of music and the top music, is it okay for me to bring up Gear 5 at this point? Because I feel like
of course we're in spoiler talk.
Just hit him with briefly as well. I'm gonna head out. I gotta go.
You got it, Toadski. Thank you for joining us.
Right, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care, buddy. Enjoy the rest of your time in the US, man.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you very much, guys,
Awesome.
and I'll talk to you guys later.
Great hanging out.
Take care, bro.
So, have a good one, bro.
With the Gear 5 stuff, right? Because they put Gear 5 in this movie. We know this now.
Yeah.
My worry was like whether or not he was Gear 5 was gonna show up anywhere in the film, but they ultimately did put it in the movie. And we have this like world-shattering music demon, and we have Gear 5, who, you know, the drums of liberation. I feel like there's a big missed opportunity for like the music of like the Nika fruit and the drums countering the music of Top Musica. And I feel like that was such a missed opportunity because Gear 5 came on the screen and he just punched really hard. You could have had Gear 4 do that. You didn't need Gear 5 for that. That's just like an eye candy, like, oh my God, they put Gear 5 in the movie, but Gear 5 didn't actually have any plot relevance. And the saddest part about that is it really could have. It really could have.
That was an important thing that
let's be honest. That's what Gear 5 does. Gear 5 is just punch harder. Let's be real.
No, but like, prior to the movie, me and Hidden had a thing, and he thought that Gear 5 wasn't going to be in there, and I was like, maybe it will be. At the time, it was like in April, we knew the music element, and that's when we just learned of Drums of Liberation. So my thought was that through the music, because that was such like that last scene was all musical, and it was like really powerful and really fit the scene too. And it was like if we got this in the anime recently where the drums of liberation, a sound of like specific drums kicked in when Luffy started fighting Kaido. And it's like that still like would have been really dope to like contradict whatever music was overlaying the drums of liberation growing to the moment Gear 5 popped off. It would have been a great teaser because you don't announce anything. It was really quick, but we didn't use any of the musical element of Gear 5, which is something that's super emphasized in a musical movie, which is like, I think that is a miss on that part because like if they were going to show it, why not emphasize the music of it at least?
I guarantee him whatever first even 10th draft of this movie, Gear 5 was never in it. And they just added it in at the last. It's very snuck in, and there's no like deliberate nature. Now I don't know how many people remember, but there was like movie 7, and like it was supposed to be before Water 7, and there's a moment in that where Luffy's taking on the final boss. And he starts to like steam up, but he like doesn't actually understand what's happening, and it's like he's getting the realization for it. And it was basically like leading in for Gear 2nd. And that movie wasn't good, but like that moment was like very. I appreciated that. Yeah. And it's like, but everything that surrounds Gear 5 and like how we got to Gear 5, like literally how we got to it with Luffy getting killed and and everything, and you're basically downplaying Dripper Scarfino here, but like this is the GOAT. It's heavy-handed. I don't know. It wasn't necessary
because I think that moment at the end of the movie, I also agree that it was probably a last-minute ad because. Up until the very last section of the movie, Luffy's final attack is Snake Man. You get that moment where his hand's going all the way around, and at that point, that would have been like one of the most recent power-ups, right? And well, okay, that's a whole nother discussion, but that's fine, Matt, if you want to stick that in. But anyway, so Snake Man arm is like swinging all the way around, and it leads to that final moment where then you see the co-op attack with Shanks, right? And that is when you get that Gear 5 moment. But I was sitting there, and I see Yannicka in the chat right now. I was sitting there next to Yannicka, and I'm like, wait, this is the Gear 5 moment? Because then you see him attack, and his hair kind of turns into the Gear 5 hair, but it's not like fully white yet. It's just kind of like this like flame form. And then it jumps to that last shot where you see Top Musical blown out, and then you see Shanks in the bottom and Luffy, and it's like real small. and that's when Luffy's got the all white look and the white hair and stuff, and that's it, and it flies by really quickly.
Yeah,
they try to hide it though with the art of it because they had the black and white line,
white with the red lines. Right. So, yeah, very very odd choice. I do wonder why they threw that in there. But I guess another thing.
I think it was just a fan service Easter egg because
that's what it felt like.
Yeah, that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah,
which doesn't feel great. You know what I mean? Like if you know, because a lot of you guys are saying it's like it wasn't necessary, and I think like if it's not necessary, then that is a knock on the situation, right?
Like the theater stuff.
But I also feel like it was unnecessary to have the laugh tales thing in Stampede. Because I feel like it would have hit harder in 967.
I heard you bring up a good point, Zach, right? Is you said, to be fair, that was one of the moments in the theater where people were hype and cheering and stuff. Whereas like a lot of other points in the movie, it didn't really have that. I think after that first song, there was cheering after Uta's first song. Like in our theater, at least, the way we saw it at the premiere in New York, is there was a lot of cheering after Uta's first song. And then like 3 or 4 songs in, there was like no reaction afterwards anymore. People were like, all right, next song.
Like Law and Cat. That was it.
Yeah,
because they got tired of it.
Right.
They got tired.
Law doing the swap was a big moment, and then Katakuri showing up was a big moment too. Yeah.
I talked about this with other people who were there at the premiere, and like I was surprised that like at the American premiere, very few people reacted to Gear 5th because like when I was at the French premiere and Gear 5th it happened, like the theater exploded like crazy. People got from their seats and like started hugging each other. It was amazing. And then the American premiere, people were like, "Cool."
I think this also goes back to real quick, Jay. Yeah, I think this goes back to what we were talking about in real life and also in the previous Reverie, though, Artur, right? Is like that conversation about popularity of One Piece and how I think you finally witnessed firsthand where I was coming from on that Reverie, right? Which is not saying that like One Piece is not the most popular it's ever been in terms of like readership worldwide. It's that in terms of North America specifically, it does not have the same clout that a lot of these other series have now. And I think so much of that is because of the history of One Piece in North America with like the 4 Kids dub and it not ever being like the popular one of the big 3. But like, yeah, worldwide, obviously it's huge. Like you're saying, there's people cheer it in the French premiere. It's all over the place in Japan. It hasn't hit that level of like super mainstream here as it has everywhere else. But I think Film Red really could be that opportunity to really do it. And I think Toei and Crunchyroll, they're pushing it, right? Like you've got the Times Square takeover, you've got the football game that they had like the halftime show be Film Red. You're seeing Film Red on billboards everywhere. I think like they really do think that this movie could be that moment. And that's why we're seeing such a big push. And really,
which on that,
because we're going into the final saga, people want to bandwagon, catch up, like more power to them. Go ahead, Randy.
Which on that, I don't feel like this film is the best introduction to like as if this is your first introduction to One Piece. Like I don't think Film Red is the right vehicle for that.
Maybe the Netflix live action will be then. Who knows?
Naturally.
But they're making a live action One Piece.
Hopefully, Matt. Hopefully.
I really do mean that because I feel like that is the potential opportunity in the West, I feel like, is you have a live action series of this thing that's on Netflix. Like, if that's not going to get people into it, I'd be hard pressed to figure out what will, at least in North America. Matt. Again, no pressure.
I'm hoping
and going off of what Randy.
Big pressure, guys. Big pressure.
No,
you're good. Something just to add on to.
Nah, put the pressure on Matt, bro. Make it good.
The pressure's already there. The pressure's
already there. Exactly. Yeah,
it's definitely there. Just to add on to that point, I think what's up?
Hey. Sorry, I meant as someone who grew up in Europe, for example, like I've always kind of been like, like we said before, like on the mentality, like of course, like One Piece is the biggest manga here, right? You go to France, Spain, Italy, or any of these countries, One Piece is like not as everywhere as in Japan, but it's like very, very present, a lot more than a series. But this was my first time coming to the US ever, and I remember just seeing a lot of Dragon Ball stuff. I'm like, wait, where's the One Piece stuff, right? Because I'm so used to that. But yeah, that's definitely like that cultural difference where like it's definitely big in Europe, Southeast Asian regions, but like the US and North America is like the point where it just hasn't managed to crack yet.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to add onto that point is that with the North American fan base in particular, and I guess this is a trend that you notice, and for most of the time, the people that don't like power scaling are people that are not always normally North American. And I'll say the reason that is because you look at the animes that have been very, very popular in this country. And you're talking about Naruto and you're talking about Dragon Ball Z in particular, right? Very heavy power scaling, meathead series, right? Naruto is a little more nuanced than Dragon Ball Z,
and
but for the most part,
to some extent, I would say JJK and My Hero too. I think
yes.
My Hero and Demon Slayer.
Yes, because of very, intricate. Yes, because of intricate power systems. It's their battle shonen as well, where One Piece has a good mixture of everything.
Yeah.
And if you look at when I went to the theater and I watched Stampede in particular, when Arthur was saying that he was surprised a lot of people weren't like going crazy over the Gear 5 moment, in Stampede, when Boa Hancock started moving, people were screaming and on their feet because I know I was. People were screaming.
I was like that at home.
I know he's muted right now, but when Matt and I were at the
I'm here, bro. Our Stampede crowd was
wild.
It was like we were watching Endgame.
It was amazing. Yeah,
every person that came on screen, everything that happened, people were losing their minds.
Yes.
And then and just to compare that is when you look at Film Red doesn't have that power scaling or meathead nature to it. It's more of a narrative film than it is more of a meathead fan service film. Now, obviously, people started cheering with Katakuri. Third act is you get a lot of the meathead stuff. You see the Katakuris, and then when Yasop and Usopp on the screen,
it's the best moment in the movie.
Like, wow.
Let's transition there. Finish, Joe.
Yes. Yeah. And then just the main point is I just think it's that the audience in North America will not receive Film Red as well as the European audience, I think, in my opinion. Just because of that nature.
We just mentioned Yasop and Usopp. Go ahead, Matt. Take it away.
So here's not only one of my favorite parts about Film Red, but also one of the things that I think from a canon perspective is the most troubling to me is the final action of Straw Hats and Red Hair Pirates fighting the Top Musica on both sides. Feels like such a wonderful thing, and specifically the Usopp and Yasop.
Oh, that's so good.
Meeting in their observation hockey and playing both sides of that attack. It was so amazing. And I was like, okay, but since this is in the movie, this isn't going to happen in the manga. And I kind of felt robbed of something.
I was so conflicted on that as well because it was like such a great moment. But I was like, I don't know if I wanted to see it here first.
So the thing with that is like that concept of Yasop and Usopp connecting like that. That's something that theorized on channel called Mind Rope, and it's like basically exactly word for word what happened between them. And so I had a lot of people in my spoiler channel saying, "Yo, it happened with Usopp and Yasop." And like when I witnessed in the movie, my jaw dropped because it was just like these intricate details of a hockey, like Artur mentioned earlier, the Shanks canceling hockey, the Yasop connecting with it, the future sight, levels to it, how Shanks was like, okay, you have future sight, but here's no more future sight. And then also the dimensional thing that we were talking about, how like a lot of the hockey stuff can cross dimensions and interact with dimensions, and there's like whole other aspects that were, I think, in my opinion, really put well on display in a way that was like really impactful the last 30 minutes, because all those different moments, while they were like, what is happening here, it still brought the audience along of like this journey of like seeing how this is where the Shanks pirates are at, this is where the Straw Hats pirates are at, and then this is how they connect.
Right.
And it's like there was so much like beauty in like it's in even in separate dimensions, like how that they could be leagues apart, but there's still that parallel there.
Yeah, the parallel between the red-haired pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates is like the reason to see this movie alone. Like genuinely.
Yeah.
Like that segment right there is so good that like I feel like that's another reason why I want to rewatch this movie really quickly too, because like obviously I don't want to sit through that whole middle portion again, but like I do want to hear the songs again, because I think the songs are really good, and I do want to see that segment again because it went by so fast and there are so many different attacks. And like those of you who haven't seen the movie yet who are watching this and then listening to our spoiler discussion, like you're not gonna get a grasp of like just how much is happening on screen at this point in the film.
Yeah.
But like you've got
as an example, someone who's
Zoro uses advanced Conqueror's Haki in Kyutorio Asura form, but it's so quick you can miss it so easily.
It's so fast. Yeah. And you see you'll see the Straw Hat characters parallel with the red-haired characters. Meanwhile, you've got Law in the background doing stuff, Kobe in the background doing stuff, all Katakuri, all these other characters are doing stuff in the background. But again, it's moving so fast in the film that it needs a rewatch. It needs the Blu-ray release to be able to pause it, to be all right, what exactly is happening in this moment? Because as I'm sure Matt knows, Oda oversees all of this, right? I'm sure they weren't going to throw something in there with a character with Conqueror's Haki and not pass it by Oda to approve it, And
on top of that,
you were saying, Parv, on the topic of the mind rope thing with the observation Haki, right?
Yeah.
I think there is genuinely a way in which to make that connection with Yasopp and Usopp happen again in the story in the final war, but it not being cross-dimensional top music or whatever, right?
Yeah,
You've got this final war where there's multiple different fronts, and the way that the characters who are the commanders of the good side communicate on each different front is through their observation Haki. I'm seeing this thing right here on Marijoa. I'm seeing this thing right above Fishman Island where the Noah's going to drop, everything's going to get destroyed. I'm seeing this thing on this other island, maybe Fullerlet or whatever, where Blackbeard pirates are, and that's going to be their primary means of communication. And I do think this is the tease for that in the canon story. So for me, it didn't ruin it at all to see it. It made it more exciting for when we do see it in the story.
And I think
it's a little cheapened because we've seen it now. If we do it again, isn't it a little cheaper?
No, I don't think it's a situation. Minor spoilers.
That's how I felt with.
Minor spoilers, by the way, for the most recent My Hero movie. I think of this in the same way, or in a different way, from what happens with Deku and Bakugo at the end of the most recent My Hero movie, right? That thing happens, and then it's clarified. Horikoshi's look, we're not going to do this in the manga now because this thing happened. This was one of my ideas for the end of My Hero, and now we're changing things up. We're going to go in a different direction. Whereas this feels like setting up a type of how to use observation Haki, instead of just being this is the only time it's going to get used.
And to add on to what Matt was asking about,
I agree with Matt that I would be disappointed, and if this is the only time we see it, or if we see it in a way where it's just done with Usopp and Yasopp, then I think it does get cheapened. But I think it's more setting our expectations for how observation Haki is going to be used in the future, as opposed to this being the one and done time it's going to be used.
Exactly. I think the way I'm seeing this, Matt, is that these are the introductions. This isn't the end level, and something that a lot of people, regardless of their experience of the movie, needs to take into consideration is that the director of the movie knows the ending. So that also knows the upper limits of what we might see. So when it comes to top musica, when it comes to these Haki things, I think a lot of them are going to be essentially training wheels to what we might be exposed to. It's not going to be a one-to-one top musica in the series, or it might not be Roger's saying, a cross-dimensional mind rope type of thing, but we've seen elements of these things to build up, and that's the same way Haki was introduced to us in the pre-time skip. Going into the time skip, it was drip fed to us, and in this similar fashion, we were drip fed a lot of these things where Hidden and I both talked about how we thought that Shanks was going to be a master of observation Haki, a master of all Haki, but specifically observation Haki. And then we see in volume 4 billion, that is the emphasized point, that he can cancel out observation Haki. And so with that same note, there's a lot of elements here that were teased prior, and this is kind of just consolidating them, but this is just the first step towards the world that the last saga is going to set up, because it'd be really weird if we didn't see anything like this or understand anything like that. And I think that was a huge reality check for a lot of people, because a lot of people came in and they were confident that this ending in Wano is going to be the peak upper limit of powers that we saw. Kaido, Luffy, their fight. And I kept on saying no, we're going to see crazier things. One, it's a shonen anime manga where that's just the trope. Everything builds up to its crazy point. But why it's interesting in One Piece is that Oda has given us the climbing the ladder to that craziness, and so the craziness makes sense to us.
And I mean, you're even seeing that in the manga right now.
I'm with you, what you're saying, Par. I agree with you, and I'm down. I'm only specifically talking about the Usopp and the Yasopp connection, because that was such a cool way to do it. And so I'm just my only thought is damn, I hope whatever's coming in the manga is going to be an even better meaning and connection point for those two characters because it's done so beautifully in this movie.
The Usopp and Yasopp.
I mentioned in my review of the movie that, like, to me, this feels like a sneak peek of what, like, the final battle of the series could be. Like, something almost kind of like Oars, like a battle where, like, everybody comes together. And it really feels like across all these things, you know, because, like, with Dawn Music, it reminded me of Blackbeard a bit, and, like, Luffy with Shanks or something. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but it's, like, this is the most excited that I felt watching a battle, like, in almost the entire series. And it's like, if we could get like this, but even bigger in terms of excitement for the final battle of the series, it would be just incredible. Like, this just feels like a proper climax.
One thing that I knew going into this movie was that Luffy and Shanks were not going to actually meet in person.
Of course.
And
you were wrong.
And
sore loser.
Artur himself was, you know, we did a collab and he did say, no, Luffy and Shanks are going to meet. I was like, that is not going to happen in the movie and not happen in the canon. Now, I'm with Matt on the point that, you know, like, there's two things as far as, like, the red-haired pirates and the straw-hat pirates that need to happen. And it's like Luffy and Shanks have to meet, and then, you know, Usopp and Yasopp have to meet. Now, Usopp and Yasopp really had, like, a legitimate connection in this where it almost felt like them meeting again, which it could feel cheapened if it's not up to that level, but I'm at least glad that they, you know, naturally, of course, did not and figured out some sort of a way to put them together, but then also not put them together by having them in two different dimensions.
Right.
Sore loser.
So two questions to the group then.
I just want to get this out there. I just want to get this out there before we continue. The Usopp Yasopp thing worries me purely because that means this entire time Yasopp could have Zoom called his son, and he just didn't.
The deadbeat still exists.
It had to be listening for a whole year, man.
Bro, it's such a deadbeat, bro. Like, what's wrong with you? You could communicate through a dimension, but you can't, like, say what's up.
Yeah, from Wano, Shanks,
happy birthday.
Shanks
like,
he
left him on red.
He does his observation hockey Zoom call like, hey, son, I just saw your bounty poster. That's so cool that you're considered a god.
Yeah.
Proud of you, buddy. Click.
Roger, remember
totally
after Shanks showed up in Wano, you had the reaction stream and I came in, and then it was basically like Yasopp probably could just talk to Usopp.
Oh, easy,
easy. And clearly from this movie, he can. Like,
it's so much worse than that.
On red.
It's so much worse than that because after they got out of, like, the top world, he could have just said, what's up? They were near each other, like, on the ocean.
Yeah.
And he was like,
on that point, I have two questions.
It was a funeral.
Yes,
Come on.
Go ahead, Matt.
One, do you think the fact that we got this great moment, which, you know, we all agree is great, even though some of us are more worried about it than others, do we think this lends to any credence that Usopp dies in the series and especially before he gets reunited with his dad? And second question, because we got this great connection point between the Straw Hats and the Red-Haired Pirates, do you believe that this leads credence to the fact that when they meet in the manga, it's going to be a daily back fight?
I hope Usopp dies.
It's going to be. It's got
to. Usopp is never dying.
Usopp
is never dying. Never dying. Usopp is never dying.
Thank you.
He is the embodiment of the reader.
When he's forgotten.
When he's forgotten.
Exactly. So he'll never die. I'm right there with you.
But isn't there
baby bag's definitely happening?
I don't buy into the Usopp's going to die theory, but isn't it kind of poetic if Usopp dies and his dad tells the stories of the great Captain
That
Usopp?
would be wild.
He's been watching the whole time.
Man.
Here's what I think. I think Usopp's not going to die because his story is going to be the inverse of Nolan the liar. We have Nolan, who was a hero who died tragically, and they made a book about him being a liar and all this stuff. We have Usopp, who's a coward and a liar, but he's going to become a hero, and his story is going to have the good end. So I could see them making a book about. They could make a book about Usopp being called the Brave Warrior Usopp. That's going to be like a flip on the Nolan.
And one of my favorite theories is that he is a descendant of Nolan.
Nothing to do with that.
Mom Black
He could die and still have his story told in a positive way.
Yeah. But what if he comes back?
But that's Oda killing the reader. That's Oda killing the reader. Oda has said that Usopp is the embodiment of the reader. So I just can't see Oda killing Usopp because that's killing us.
I agree. I agree.
Kaya, he tells Kaya all his stories, and Kaya is the one who writes the book. like the Odyssey. Like she's the one who was waiting for him to get back home. He finally gets back home, tells her all the stories, and she's the one who writes the book. That just works so well.
Listen, as long as it's not Yasop telling the stories, I'm good.
And write a book.
Yeah.
It could also be his crew. It could be the kids, the kids that Usopp had on the island.
Yeah, no. One of them wanted to be a writer.
One of them wanted to be a
One of
writer.
them wanted to be a writer. There you go. That's it. That's it.
It's set up. Wild.
It's Usopp the hero. Usopp the
I think it was Onion. I think Onion wanted to be a writer.
Yeah. You mentioned the Usopp thing, but on the topic of the Davy back fight thing, I mean, that was something we all brought up right after watching the movie. I think that was one of the first conversations we had when we walked back down like that red carpet area after we went down the escalators, and we're all meeting with everybody. And yeah, one of the big things that came up after this was like that would be such a cool way to have the quote unquote fight against Shanks, right? And have the ultimate moment, because I've been saying this for however long, that I don't think Shanks ever gives the hat back to Luffy. I mean, I don't think Luffy ever gives the hat back to Shanks is what I mean. I think there's going to be a moment where Luffy and Shanks, they have the debut back fight, whatever. They quote unquote beat the red-haired pirates. But then in the moment in which he gives the hat back, or he's about to give the hat back, Blackbeard swoops in, kills Shanks, something happens, and he's not actually physically able to do that, right? Like, I do think there will be a meeting with Shanks. Obviously, it didn't happen in this movie. But I do think there will be a moment in which Luffy and Shanks meet, but I don't think the moment of literally giving the hat back to him will ever happen in the story. I just don't.
I think the Davy back fight is over the
In this
hat.
conversation right now, is that the thing that Luffy takes when they win the Davy back fight?
I think it's
He's
the
like,
last
I
one.
have my
That's
crew.
what I
I
was
don't need
thinking.
one of yours. I'm keeping the hat.
Interesting.
The hat is mine.
Play for the.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that,
I like
bro.
that too. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
So
any other? Go ahead, Jay.
I just want whatever. I just want whatever Davy back fight actually happens to be about Robin. Like
That'd be sick. Yeah, I would love that. Reading the poneglyphs. What were you gonna say, Jay?
Yeah, I said I have to dip. I got to dip.
Well, that's fine. So I'm planning on wrapping it up too because it's 2.5 hours. I got to be in the airport at 12 hours, so we have to end this too. Any last minute thing you guys want to say before we close this baby out?
I just want to say thank you for having us. I mean,
absolutely, of course.
Thank you, Roger.
It was an absolute pleasure hanging out with everybody while we were in New York and getting to have drinks afterwards and chilling and stuff. It was a blast. Yeah. So anytime,
I want to
obviously
set some fire on something because this is something Jay is about to leave. So we had a visceral reaction to one of the moments in the movie. Do you want?
Thank you for
before you go, you want to bring that up?
Yeah, we got to say this before you leave.
This will be my final thoughts. The reason Uta, my opinions on her character diminished aggressively. Like it was bad. It was really bad. I'm not sugarcoating this at all. The fact that she said that I knew a year after and still went through with this, to me, is character destruction on a level I haven't seen in a long time.
It was
like
so
I was cool with her, but that was just so bad. Like it's something that just didn't even need to be mentioned. Like if it wasn't mentioned at all, Uta goes from like a 3 to like a 6 to me immediately. And I'm just like, if you guys have differing opinions, I completely understand. For me, that was a massive deal breaker.
So what
I agree.
What Jay's referring to is the moment that she knew that Shanks wasn't responsible for the destruction of the island, right?
Yeah,
and then her whole hatred for pirates and everything, like it's just so foolish. I just don't.
I don't vibe with you anymore.
It also proves to us that she knows what top music is capable of, and yet she still went through with bringing it back.
Anyway.
She's a bad person,
right? So that's like irredeemable as far as I'm concerned.
I'm both willing to defend that, but I also agree with you in part. I think it works because it clearly shows that like the real fault of the movie, I don't think was Todd Music or Ruta herself or anything. I don't think she was necessarily being evil, but the pressure of her whole audience, of all those people suffering on her as literally a content creator, and how that played on her mind, I think brought her to the point where even finding out the truth, it didn't matter. She was forced into that mentality that like, I have to do this, I have to change the world, no matter the cost, no matter the thing, and it works. But I do agree at the same time that it's also presented in such a way that it does kind of feel a bit like counterintuitive, and probably it still could have all worked without that thing. So I do agree in part with
because the other part was the whole change about, at the end she's like, wait, I can use my powers for good. That felt like so flat because that's what she could have done from the very beginning, right?
Easily.
what happened during that time where she realized, like, hey, I'm using my power wrong and I should use it for good? What happened? Was it just Shanks showing up and just like being like, hey, bro, like, you know, we're doing the wrong thing right now? Because that whole part felt a little weird, because if she knew from the very beginning what Top Musica was capable of, if she also knew that she could use her power for good, but then ultimately used it for bad, what happened in that situation that turned her the wrong way? Because she already doubled down like 100,000%, and it's like at the very end for her to flip after like doubling down for her entire life on this plan, it's like it's not as exactly how like most I was gonna ask you guys, like, you guys are rating antagonists of these movies, so like Uta as an antagonist for this movie isn't the strongest one.
No, for her, she was like carried by her relationship with Shanks and Luffy. Like that was pretty much the only reason I cared about her. Like even at the end, it was like really just her relationship with Shanks that like made me care for her at all. I think that was the number one thing that was really well done with her character. But
you would argue the music as well, though, right? Because like I think the music, regardless of whether or not you really liked having that many musical numbers, I think the way the music was done in this movie to sort of like show what her inner thoughts are or whatever, like how when she's angry, there's like a rage song. You know, you have the opening number, you get the new Genesis thing, you got the Top Musica stuff. I thought that aspect of it was really good, and I think had they play with that a little more, and again, it might take a rewatch of like looking at the lyrics again, because there's a lot of stuff that's layered in there.
Yeah, I didn't really
She says
get
liberation a lot of times. There's very specific phrases and keywords that One Piece fans are going to pick up on when you are reading the lyrics. The only problem is that, again, when you're watching it in that IMAX format and there's all these things going on screen and you're trying to catch something, you're going to, like, unfortunately, in one watch, miss some of those lyrics. You're not going to catch everything. And I think that's where the good part of this movie comes in, right? Is that, like, it's going to be good to rewatch. Because there's going to be a lot of things when you go back to it again where you're going to be like, oh, I didn't realize she was saying this thing, or this was what she meant when she said this thing. So, yeah, that aspect of it I thought was really cool. Yeah.
I'll tell you what changed. Uda got her ass beat, and then all of a sudden she dropped her plans. That's what happened. she was ready. She was all gung-ho about it until she got knocked out.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's a what?
I'm just saying, if
I said, okay, so she's a One Piece villain.
There you go. She's a One Piece villain. Right.
I did like. You're right, Matt. You're right.
I like it. I don't care. He was like, I'll tell you. I don't care.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to leave it there because it's been okay. One last thing, because it's been 2.5 hours, so we're going to wrap it up here. Who had that? Who wants to have the last word? Who said the one last thing? Who just said it?
I'm just saying that if I read the YouTube comments as well, I would do the same. I would at least start Musica, bro.
There you
After
go.
reading that YouTube comments, that's what I did.
All right, so basically don't leave negative comments on Artur, because otherwise if he ever gets the devil fruit, he's going to kill you all. All right, so that's what the giant takeaway is from this. So thank you once again, everybody, for tuning into the live stream. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you to all of you for joining me as well. Links to all their channels will be down in the description below, so definitely make sure to check out all of them. And then I guess the other thing with Matt, since Matt doesn't have a YouTube channel, go watch the One Piece Netflix live action when it comes out next year. Definitely
Please watch my show.
Thank you
Please
once
watch
again
my
to
show.
everybody, and please let us know in the comment section if you saw Film Red, what you thought of Film Red, your thoughts on things. I'm sure we'll be reading the comments, except for Artur again, who doesn't want to see anything negative, which is totally okay. That's fine. But any other comments about the movie, make sure to leave them down below. Greatly appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.